Chapter 927. With this idea in mind, Miguel got in touch with the Golden Border Dynasty. In order to let the other party see his strength, he deliberately sold them 200 firearms. After earning a lot of money, the other party's attitude towards them became warmer. They even sent a messenger, Kamoy, to negotiate with them. The two sides negotiated. Everything else was easy to discuss, including bringing back the goods from here to the Western world. They could also sign a long-term contract to supply firearms and so on. For this, the Golden Rim Dynasty was also willing to pay a large sum of money. However, when it came to renting a city to them, Kamoy directly refused. Kamoy said, "The Gilded Dynasty is a country with complete sovereignty and territory. It is impossible for them to rent out a city. This is a provocation to the royal family. The king, ministers, and the people will not tolerate it." The negotiations had to stop. Just as Miguel was still thinking about how to persuade Kamoy, the war suddenly broke out. A ship with a 5-star flag suddenly sailed into the port of the Goldilocks dynasty and began to disembark after a series of bombardments. Everything happened so quickly that by the time Miguel got the news and sent Deputy General Cruz to check on the situation, everything had already been settled. Because of this, Kurlutz did not have the chance to see the moment when the mercenary navy showed off their power. This sowed the root of their destruction not long after. The port of the Golden Border Dynasty was opened by the mercenary military force, so there was no need for peace talks. Miguel decided to wait and see. He wanted to see who won and who lost, and how he would benefit from it. He did not have to wait too long. Before the war was over, Kamoy appeared and expressed that their king was willing to rent a seaside city to the Spanish Navy. He did not even want any reward. He only asked them to drive the mercenary ships out of the sea. In the previous negotiations, Special Envoy Miguel bragged more than once about how powerful their navy is, how terrifying the power of their artillery is, and so on. In short, they described themselves as invincible in the world. Kamoy came with the intention of King Boromir, which made Envoy Miguel very happy. However, he didn't agree immediately because in his eyes, mercenaries were a better partner. The other party had more novel goods. Now that the Golden Rim Dynasty was in danger, and was about to be occupied by the mercenaries, why not have a good talk with the mercenaries? In such a sensitive period he might get more benefits. He only said that he needed to think about it, and sent Kamoy away. Then, Envoy Miguel called his Deputy General, Cruz, and asked him to talk to the mercenaries on his behalf. However, this time, the cities they rented had increased from 1 to 3. Miguel's learning ability was very strong. During this period of time, he learned that Eastern businessmen always liked to bargain when talking about things. Sometimes, the asking price might be a frightening amount, but the real transaction price would be very low. When he first came here, he had suffered a lot because of this. Now that he had experience, he wanted 3 cities. In his opinion, even if he couldn't reach an agreement, he could still negotiate. At least 2 cities shouldn't be a problem. But he didn't know that it was impossible for the mercenaries to negotiate with them about territorial issues. His approach was just asking for trouble. Cruz, who received the order, came to the port of Gombo in a warship disguised as a merchant ship, but what he didn't expect was that his ship wasn't approved. In desperation, he had to drive a small boat into the port and saw Long Yuntian, the commander of the 1st Marine Army's 3rd Division, who was commanding the overall situation here. With Yang Chendong's words, Long Yuntian was not only no longer the acting head, but also the commander of the 3rd Division. His gratitude was needless to say. He had already made up his mind to follow the 6th Young Master for a lifetime. At this time he was commanding the 4th Marine Division to cooperate with the 6th Young Master's attack from the north. The Marine Cold Front was a dragon on the sea and a tiger on land. They were powerful. Although the Golden Rim Dynasty sent 100,000 troops to support them, they didn't gain any advantage in the hands of Long Yuntian. They completed the orders of the 6th Young Master very well, and destroyed the 50,000 Marines of the Golden Rim Dynasty, and captured most of the enemy. Long Yuntian was in a good mood these days because he also restrained the other side's 100,000 Marines. He received a report from the soldiers that a Spanish general wanted to see him. With curiosity and a good mood, the two sat together face to face in a courtyard in the port of Gombo. Cruz had a typical Westerner's face, white skin and blue eyes. But Long Yuntian, who often walked on the sea, saw many people like him, so he didn't care. He politely invited the other party to drink tea, and even handed him a cigarette to show his hospitality. The reason why the mercenaries were so powerful, in the end, in addition to Yang Chendong's ideas that played a big role in it, it was because of the commercial development. It was precisely because they had money that they had an invincible army, and that they could roam freely in any place. Long Yuntian thought that the other party wanted to do business with him, which could be regarded as a merit, so he greeted the other party warmly. Unexpectedly, the expectation was too different from what he imagined. The other party actually wanted to rent a seaside city, and asked for 3 at once. He also deliberately pointed out that the mercenaries and the Golden Rim Dynasty were in a stalemate, and the Golden Rim Dynasty had agreed to their request to rent a city. The indirect meaning was very obvious. The Golden Rim Dynasty agreed. If the mercenaries didn't agree, then the next course of action for the Spanish warships was very clear. Damn, only 20 warships and they are so arrogant. They don't want to live. After hearing the other party's request, Long Yuntian's face showed an angry look. The translator sent by the First Red Nest Academy didn't speak. He knew that some words couldn't be translated casually. What did he say? Cruz looked at the translator puzzled. Although he didn't understand Chinese, he could see that Long Yuntian's expression seemed to be a bit wrong and his mood seemed to be a little bad. Division Commander Long said that he can't decide on this matter, and needs to ask for instructions from above. The translator had no choice but to find an excuse with a smile. Well, then we'll wait for you to make a decision, but please hurry up. Our warships are parked not far away. As long as you agree, we can immediately provide artillery support to help you repel the soldiers of the Golden Rim Dynasty. Cruz said proudly. At this moment, it was as if he could dominate the battle with a single move. Okay. The interpreter nodded with a smile, then conveyed Kurlut's message to Long Yuntian. At the end he added some words of his own. Commander Long, you should ask the dean before making a decision on this matter. Well, yes, asked the 6th young master. Long Yuntian nodded and agreed. He asked the translator to arrange a place for Cruz to rest. He went to the telegraph room and reported what happened here. The telegram was quickly sent to Yang Chendong. After reading it, his face was as calm as water, but the movements of his hands had completely exposed his thoughts. The telegram was tightly clenched into a ball by his right hand. Beta Persei, telegram. Beta Persei, who rarely saw the 6th young master angry, immediately took out his pen and paper. At the same time he felt sad for some people. Although he didn't know what the telegram was about, provoking the young master was no different from provoking the king of hell. The telegram was sent out and quickly reached Long Yuntian's hands. Looking at the telegram in his hand, his expression was first surprised, then excited, and then dignified. Then he shouted, "Come, invite that Spanish Deputy General over." 3 hours later, Deputy General Cruz reappeared on the Spanish warship and reported the whole negotiation to the envoy Miguel. Oh, did they agree? Miguel's face revealed a hint of surprise. Yes, General. Not only did they agree, but they also fully satisfied our requirements. They will give us 3 cities as a foothold. Haha, in fact, this is easy to figure out. These territories are not theirs to begin with. Naturally, they won't feel bad about giving them away. Of course, they also made 2 requests. Cruz smiled and took out the contract he signed with Long Yuntian. What are the requests? Miguel asked. First, find out the military headquarters of the Goldilocks dynasty in the south, and then destroy them. Second, hand over the messenger of the Goldilocks dynasty, Kamoy, to them. When Cruz said these 2 requests, there was no strange look on his face. Not only him, but even Miguel also did not show a curious look. It was probably because these 2 requests were nothing to him at all. Or perhaps, this was an opportunity for them to show their strong combat power. It was a way to show off their means. Okay, agree to them. This time, we will use this opportunity to attack the people of the Goldilocks dynasty, and let the mercenaries see our strength. In this way, let's see if they dare to be dishonest when dealing with us in the future. Yes, General. Should I invite Kamoy over? Kurlutz had a sinister smile on his face. Kamoy, who was locked in the room, was still anxiously waiting for Miguel's answer. This time, in order to solve the siege of the capital, the king even agreed to give up the land and the city. This showed that the capital was already very dangerous. Now he only hoped that Miguel would agree to his request quickly. In the long wait, every passing minute was a torture for him. Finally, there was a knock on the door, and Cruz's voice came out. "Mr. Messenger, our general wants to see you." Chapter 928. Kamoy met Miguel again as he wished, and then got a very satisfactory result. The other party agreed to the deal, and proposed to meet with their commanding general to discuss how to deal with the mercenaries. Although the number of reinforcements was only 2,000, they all had guns, and the Spanish warships also had cannons, which were not available in the Golden Border Dynasty. Once used well, it could play a role in a surprise attack, and it was not impossible to reverse the situation of the war. Kamoy left happily, and when he returned to the ship a day later, he brought the news that the southern command of the Golden Border Dynasty agreed to the alliance. Soon afterward, the 2,000 Spanish troops disembarked and left behind Kamoy's messenger. Then Long Yuntian received the information sent by Kurlutz, and the first and second groups set off. An unfathomable but chaotic battle began. Miguel led Kurlutz to attack the command center of the southern army of the Golden Border Dynasty, with 2,000 flintlock soldiers. Then the main force of the Navy's Cold Front Division suddenly appeared, surrounded the place, destroyed their command system, and shot the commander. At first glance, it looked as if the mercenaries were working together with the Spanish army. But suddenly, the mercenaries opened fire at the unprepared Spanish army, who were about to enjoy the fruits of their victory. Finally, Hai's 3rd Division showed their strength. Both sides were using flintlocks, but one side was using flintlocks that were slightly more advanced than the Ming dynasties, while the other side was using a more powerful, long-range and accurate rifle. Before the battle had even begun, the victor had already been decided. After a chaotic battle, Miguel, Kurlutz, Kamoy, and others were captured. It was the so-called mantis stalks the silkworm, unaware of the oriole behind. The Spanish army, Kamoy, and others were used and became captives in the hands of the mercenaries. Also captured were 20 warships belonging to the Spanish. They were occupied by the 4th Sea Division. And then the warships went straight to the harbor of Chimney City. The southern command of the Golden Border Dynasty was destroyed, and the 100,000 troops were leaderless. Taking advantage of this opportunity, the 4th Sea Division launched a full army charge. The army was defeated in the chaos, and the southern defense line was broken. All of this was Yang Chendong's strategy, using the Spanish army to defeat the southern army of the Golden Border Dynasty. Judging from the results, the process was not complicated, but it was complicated to have the courage to attack the Spanish. In other people's eyes, they definitely wouldn't act rashly without knowing the details. However, in Yang Chendong's eyes, all of this was nothing. First, he made use of the other party's belief in the contract to make them fight for him. After that, he immediately sent out troops to encircle and annihilate them. Now it seemed that the plan was well thought out, and the result was successful. As for whether Spain would send people to cause trouble for him in the future? Sorry, even if they didn't come looking for trouble, Yang Chendong would still fight them. To him, it was only a matter of time. This time it was just an appetizer. The defeat on the southern front was like adding hail to snow. The Golden Rim dynasty was completely in a passive position. At this moment, the 4th Army Division led by Yang Chendong and the 1st World Cavalry Regiment had successfully occupied the eastern city of Borromean. At this point, they were only separated from the capital by Dakmeo City. It was no exaggeration to say that the Golden Rim city of the Golden Rim dynasty had appeared in front of the mercenaries. It was only a matter of time before they captured it. In the capital of Golden Rim City, when the news came, the entire capital was in chaos. Countless merchants and people wanted to escape from the war. There were even many family members of the officials among them. Left Prime Minister Ding Dingwei, who had long predicted this, gave a death order. The 4 cities were closed. Even if they were trapped in the city and died, no one was allowed to escape. It was not that Ding Dingwei was ruthless. It was just that such a chaotic situation was likely to give the mercenaries a chance to enter the city. If that was the case, they would lose their last chance to negotiate with the mercenaries. Once the royal family was destroyed, Ding Dingwei would become the biggest sinner. The royal palace was no longer as high-spirited as before. Whether it was King Boromir, left Prime Minister Ding Dingwei, or Dagon, who was the general of the city's defense, they all looked very disheveled at this moment. Everyone looked much older and more haggard. What's the situation in the city? Is there any news from the Allies' reinforcements? Boromir was still sitting on the throne, but at this moment his eyes were listless and his body was weak. The 4 gates are closed. No one is allowed to leave the city. The situation is still stable. The food in the city is enough for at least 3 months. As for the Allies' reinforcements, they said that they are still preparing. They want us to hold on for 1 more month no matter what. Left Prime Minister Ding Dingwei said these words weakly. He knew in his heart that the Golden Rim dynasty was finished. 1 month. Boromir sneered. The mercenaries' progress was so fast that not only did they catch him off guard, but also the Allies. Since that was the case, there was no need to rely on them. His gaze moved from Ding Dingwei to General Dagon. If we defend Golden Rim City to the death, can we hold on for a month? Dagon looked troubled. Your Majesty, I'm afraid it's difficult. But I and the 60,000 soldiers in the city will not retreat. At this moment, Dagon showed the calm side of a general in the face of death. This made Boromir feel relieved. However, there was no hope in resisting. What was the point of it? At most, more people would die. Report. At this moment, a messenger ran in from outside the hall. He knelt on the ground and looked at King Boromir. He lowered his head and said nervously, Your Majesty, news just came from the front lines. Darkmouth City has opened its gates and surrendered. The main force of the mercenaries is coming to the royal city. Ha 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 ha. Boromir laughed when he heard the news. Then he smashed the crown that symbolized his status as a king on the ground. Surrender? Surrender? Could it be that this prince has mistreated them? Why don't they even have the courage to resist? Why? Ding Dingwei saw Boromir roaring like a madman and repeatedly said, Your Majesty, take care of yourself. Okay, you don't have to persuade me. My days are numbered. Boromir shook his head. After a long while he looked at Ding Dingwei and said in an extremely weak voice, Since that is the case, let's negotiate with them and surrender. After saying this, Boromir seemed to have exhausted all his strength. Then he plopped back on the throne and waved his hand repeatedly. He wanted Ding Dingwei and Dagon to make the decision. The 2 civil and military officials wanted to say some words of comfort, but they felt that anything they said would be useless. They cupped their hands and left. Instead of saying anything, they might as well do what they were about to do. At the very least, they had to seek some benefits for their king through negotiations. They had to take advantage of the fact that they could still defend the royal city and make some demands. Right Minister Ducey's residence was heavily guarded by soldiers. No matter how chaotic the royal city was, this place was still as peaceful as before. No one could disturb this place. Skylark's residence was the best protection. This was the backup plan that Boromir had left for himself. It had only been 20 days since the start of the war, but the situation had already turned upside down. Things had remained the same, but people had changed. Left Minister Ding Dingwei and General Dagon appeared in the Right Minister's residence together. The former Right Minister, Dagon, tactfully avoided meeting them. Ever since he agreed to go to court with Skylark, he was destined to retire from politics and enter business. Seeing that he was about to get what he wanted, he would naturally think of a way to facilitate this peace negotiation. In an extremely elegant and remote courtyard, the 3 of them met. Yunk was still as calm as ever. Even when Ding Dingwei and Daen came together, he didn't give them a second glance and continued to brew his tea. However, there were 2 chairs placed in front of him, indicating that he had already prepared everything. This place is really peaceful. I didn't expect Mr. Yin to be so calm when the outside world is so chaotic. It is truly admirable. Ding Dingwei looked at the surroundings and said emotionally, Don't worry, King Boromir can also live such a peaceful life in the future. As long as he doesn't want to, he can refuse to see any guests. At this moment, the tea was ready. Skylark poured a cup for each of the guests and pointed to the chairs in front of him. Thank you. Ding Dingwei and Dagon looked at each other and sat down together. The negotiation officially began. If we choose to surrender now, I don't know how the Duke of Loyalty is going to treat my king and the ministers. Ding Dingwei took a sip of tea and went straight to the point. The king will be put under house arrest, and the other ministers will hand over half of their property. They will then be transformed into ordinary people. Of course, if anyone wants to serve the Duke of Loyalty, they can also submit an application. We will make appropriate arrangements according to their ability. Skylark quickly answered. He had studied these matters repeatedly over the years and already knew what to do. Skylark's answer was not out of Ding Dingwei's expectations. As far as he knew, the king of Jiaoji and the king of Lansang Kingdom were also treated the same way. However, he didn't expect it to be the Golden Bian dynasty's turn so soon. Thinking about it, it was as if everything happened yesterday. Although he knew that things should be done this way. Since it was a peace negotiation, of course, he had to strive for more conditions that were beneficial to him. Ding Dingwei immediately said, I still have 60,000 soldiers in the capital, and I still have the ability to fight. My king is not a defeated king. It seems a bit unreasonable to still have the same conditions. Oh, you still have 60,000 soldiers? Skylark seemed to be interested and raised his head. Chapter 929. Yes, we still have 60,000 soldiers. They are all elites, and they can fight against many on the battlefield. We are really. General Dagon wanted to continue his introduction. Unexpectedly, Skylark opened her mouth and said, They're just chickens and dogs. If you're not convinced, you can fight. The mercenaries can easily destroy them with less than 10,000 men. Do you believe me? Skylark's calm aura changed as his gaze landed on Dagon's body, becoming a little sharper. Dagon, who was being stared at, wanted to say no and shake his head. However, he knew that the people were in chaos and the morale of the army was low. The so-called 60,000 soldiers were just a number. If they really faced the mercenaries, they would definitely lose. Ding Dingwei sighed in his heart. He knew that his idea of using the army as a bargaining chip had failed. He also knew that they were meat on the chopping block. They had lost the right to speak and the right to make conditions. Young seemed to have noticed that Ding Dingwei was past his prime. He took out a telegram and placed it on the table. As the general of Chuanlong City, Hamo should have defended the city to the death and waited for reinforcements. However, not only did he not do so, he did not protect the people under his rule. Instead, he set his horse on fire, causing tens of thousands of people in the city to be injured and killed. Not only that, you even put the blame on the mercenaries. Now that Hamo has been captured, he has told the truth. Soon, the truth will be revealed to the world. As an envoy, Hamo did not refuse the unreasonable request made by the Spanish army. Instead, he agreed to cede a city in exchange for benefits and asked them to send troops to deal with the mercenaries. This is clearly an act of dividing the country. He is a sinner of the Golden Border Dynasty. Now that he has been captured by the mercenaries, he has confessed everything he has done. Both of you martial artists do not think about war, and scholars do not think about remonstrances. Do you think there is any hope for the Golden Border Dynasty even if it survives? Since he could no longer display his brilliance in Boromov's hands, it would be better for him to hand over his power and let us, the Duke of Faithfulness, change them. Just like Laos in Vietnam, the government is now harmonious, the economy is developing rapidly, and the people are living the life they want. Isn't that good? Isn't that what a subject wants to see? Skylark pointed at two things and spoke in a strict tone, forcing Ding Dingwei and Dagon to lower their heads involuntarily. Yes, there were indeed a lot of internal problems in the Golden Bian dynasty. To solve this problem, it was not just a matter of money, but a fundamental change was needed. This could only be done by mercenaries. Facts also proved that in the areas they ruled, the lives of the people were indeed higher than other forces. Otherwise, there would not be people of the Golden Border dynasty who had escaped, and the Golden Border army would not have sealed the border, which eventually led to the end of the war. King Boromir was a despicable person. Even now, the silver in the treasury had not been touched. The recruitment of new soldiers was only halfway done. Who could say that the current state of the Gilded Dynasty was not caused by this king? The two civil and military officials lowered their heads at this moment, speechless. They really did not know what to say. On the other hand, Skylark's stern expression disappeared in an instant. She regained her calm expression and said, "The Duke of Loyalty has already sent an order. Boromir must step down and leave this place. He must rush to another place where he is under house arrest. Of course, his safety is guaranteed. Not only that, but the two of you as loyal subjects have a chance to see him once a year. It can be regarded as doing your duty as a subject. Oh, by the way, to do this, the two of you must stay and continue to do something for the Golden Dynasty. Otherwise, you will not have such qualifications." Stay. Both Ding Dingwei and Dan were stunned. They did not understand what Skylark meant. "Yes, stay. This is the Duke of Loyalty's order. Now that the Golden Dynasty has been established, there are many things to be done. The two of you know the situation here better. Recently, your performance has also proved your ability and your character. The Duke of Loyalty admires this very much, so he asked you to stay. In the future, the Golden Dynasty will no longer exist, and it will be renamed Cambodia Province. Duan will be the garrison general here, responsible for the reconstruction of the army and the security of the province. Ding Dingwei will be the deputy governor, responsible for the people's livelihood and economic development here." When it came to Ding Dingwei, Young's face showed a trace of envy and said, "The position of deputy governor is already very high. It's not even lower than your current position of left prime minister. This shows how much importance the Duke of Loyalty values you." Skylark's sudden words were indeed beyond the two's expectations. They only wanted to be loyal to King Boromir, who had given them a lot of kindness. They did not expect to be chosen by the Duke of Loyalty. For a moment, they did not know how to answer. However, Ding Dingwei was accustomed to storms and waves. After a moment of hesitation, he replied, "What if we don't agree? The Duke of Loyalty will not force anyone. If the two of you do not agree, you can enjoy the same treatment as the other ministers. However, I still suggest that the two of you stay. After all, we have persevered until now not only because of Boromir, but also because of the people and the army." The Duke of Loyalty said that as long as the two of you stay, there will be no problem with the funds. As long as the expenses are reasonable, he will approve. Not only that, but the treasury left behind by Boromir will also be left in Cambodia Province. After the war, there are many things waiting to be done. The people are in a terrible situation. If we want their standard of living to catch up, or even catch up with Laos and Vietnam, we will need to invest a lot of money. This is a good opportunity. I personally think that only the two of you understand the situation here. With the two of you, the people here will suffer less, and they will not be bullied. If it was someone else, everything would be different." Although Yang said that Yang Chendong would not force anyone, what he meant was that they should stay and ask them in the name of the people. This was Yang Chendong's intention. History had proven that the method of controlling the barbarians with the barbarians was effective. Since that was the case, why should he give up what was near and seek what was far away? He only needed to arrange the position of a provincial governor to oversee the overall situation. As for the other cadres, he still needed to keep some of the old ministers. This way, he could save a lot of time to understand and work together. Ding Dingwei and Dain listened attentively. Their hearts were already somewhat moved. Young had already said that the treasury would not be taken away, and the Duke of Loyalty would invest more money. In this way, with the idea that money made the world go round, the future Phnom Penh dynasty it should be said that the future of Cambodia province was still promising. Both of them were not too old, and they also wanted to do something. Now that the era of Boromir had passed, even if it was for the sake of the future generations, they should do well. After this incident, the relationship between Young and the other two seemed to be a lot closer. When the two of them negotiated, they began to set out from the perspective of how to rebuild Cambodia province. Naturally, everything went according to their wishes. 4 days later, On the 31st day of the mercenaries' counterattack on the first blockade in Shanding City, the negotiation ended. On behalf of the mercenaries, Yonk accepted the surrender letter from King Boromir of the former Phnom Penh dynasty. From the beginning to the end, it only took a month. Although there was still a lot of work to be done after this, the speed at which the armed forces of a kingdom were disarmed was still shocking. Yang Chendong had said before that he would solve the problem of the Phnom Penh dynasty by force in 1 to 2 months. Now he had done it, and it was done with the best standards. This made Luan Shaoqian, the governor of Laos, who was in charge of logistics, feel less pressure. In order to restrain Siam and Ava from sending troops to help the Phnom Penh dynasty, Luan Shaoqian first gave the merchants of the two countries a tax reduction and discounts on goods, and other benefits to show their friendship. It turned out that this trick was indeed very effective. When the news of the war came, the Phnom Penh dynasty sent people to seek military support from the two allies. These merchants made a lot of obstacles, which slowed down the speed of the two countries' troops. Now that the Phnom Penh dynasty had changed its name to Cambodia province, their army still had not been assembled. Without external interference, now that the war was over, Siam and Ava had no reason to send troops. While they had to swallow this bitter fruit, they also began to strengthen their armaments because they had a feeling that the rapidly developing mercenary army would not let them stay. One day, they would be eaten up like the Phnom Penh dynasty. For this reason, the kings of the two countries reached a private agreement that no matter which country was attacked in the future, the other country must unconditionally provide support. This was originally for their own survival. The spies of the Security Bureau and the CIA buried in the two countries reported this news to Yang Chendong. He just glanced at it and threw it aside. What he needed to do now was to stabilize the situation in Cambodia. It was true that he did not have more strength to conquer other countries. It was not that he did not have enough soldiers to conquer these two small countries, but that he did not have enough manpower to occupy and manage them. Not to mention, as soon as the war started, Baiming and Nanming had already taken action. Chapter 930. As more and more Han people entered the grassland's first city, and these Han people were sent there after being trained in Chichen City, the spies of the northern and southern Ming went there one after another, using various means to extract information from these people. Yang Chendong was the leader of the mercenaries, and the fact that Chichen City was his headquarters was basically known to the whole world. This time, Yang Chendong took the initiative to attack the Phnom Penh dynasty, which made the northern and southern Ming feel a strong sense of crisis, so they also learned from him and took the initiative to start the expansion journey. For example, the southern Ming took the initiative to send an army to approach the sphere of influence of the king of Min Zhuang. Baiming also began to mobilize an army to rush to Datong Mansion and Xian Mansion. They wanted to launch a pincer attack on the Walla leader Yes Hen in the Hatao area. The situation suddenly became tense because of this. Yang Chendong also ordered the commander of Tiger's Man in the first city to keep an eye on Baiming's every move. Once they found out that they had bad intentions, they should not be soft-hearted or afraid. When the enemy attacked, they just had to deal with them properly. While the first city was ready to defend, Yang Chendong also sent a telegram to the general of Yunnan province, Hong Jin, to send troops to Liangshan. He wanted to show his presence in front of the forces of Baiming and the king of Min Zhuang, and also indirectly warn both sides to be careful of his existence as a fisherman. In terms of original intention, Yang Chendong did not want to see the southern Ming unify the south. A strong and complete southern Ming was not what Yang Chendong wanted to see now. What he wanted to see was a serious internal friction in the southern Ming, which would play a better role in promoting his presence there in the future. No matter how chaotic the situation outside was, Yang Chendong's eyes were still on the newly established Cambodia province. When the capital, Phnom Penh City, also opened its door and surrendered, and King Boromir was secretly sent to Chichen City, the previously prepared 340,000 people also went down the Mekong River. Among the 340,000 people, there were Han people in Chichen City, Mongols in the first city, and foreigners in Laos and Yunnan province. Yang Chendong adopted the method of mixing sand to reduce the proportion of the original residents. However, in the face of Cambodia, which had a population of 4 million people, A mere 300,000 people could not solve any fundamental problems, which was also what troubled him the most recently. Sun Xiaoguang was one of the cadres that Yu Qian, the governor of Qiqian City, valued highly. When he was less than 40 years old, he was found to have the ability to manage and see the overall situation. He began to be put in an important position and participated in the construction of Qiqian City. This time, when Yang Qindong asked Yu Qian for him, he was entrusted with an important position and became the first governor of Cambodia province. At this time, he was standing in the palace of Phnom Penh City, reporting to Yang Qindong about his work and some of the difficulties he was facing now. Governor's son, leave a quarter of the palace as my office in the future. You can rebuild the rest of the place into a commercial street. Compared to the special geographical location of Cambodia province, this place will become an important base for the business of the sea route. If it is done well, the business here will be very promising. This can also make this place a place to generate tax. You must seize the opportunity. Looking at Sun Xiaoguang, Yang Qindong gave advice on the local conditions. Yes, sixth young master, Xiaoguang understands. Sun Xiaoguang replied in a deep voice. Although in terms of age he was much older than Yang Qindong, it did not prevent him from admiring the sixth young master. Perhaps in the entire Qiqian city, there was no one who did not respect the sixth young master, who had brought them everything they had today. Compared to Laos and Vietnam province, Cambodia's territory is not very big. It should be easier to manage. I will see your performance. By the way, do you have any difficulties? Feel free to tell me. If I can solve it, I will help you. Yang Qindong spoke again. This time, he met Sun Xiaoguang not only to encourage him in his work, but also to help him solve practical problems. Everything was ready. Logically speaking, Sun Xiaoguang only needed to develop slowly according to the plan. It was only a matter of time before changes and gains were made. However, since he had the opportunity to make a request, he would not miss it. Sixth young master, if it's possible, can you move some of the people here away? You said just now that Cambodia's territory is not very big, but it has a large population. With such a large population base, according to the previous regulations, the land is not enough to be distributed. You can't expect everyone to go into business, right? Although some factories will be built here in the future, it will still take time. During this time, many people will have nothing to do. I am worried that as time goes by. Tell me, how many people do you think it is appropriate to move? Yang Qindong waited for Sun Xiaoguang to report the data. When he opened his mouth, he went straight to the heart of the problem. Half. If you can move half of the population, I can guarantee that everyone here will have something to do. The situation will be completely stable, and the speed of development in the future will be good. Finally, Sun Xiaoguang seized the opportunity and demanded an exorbitant price. He wanted to move 2 million people. 2 million. Yang Qindong did not expect Sun Xiaoguang's request to be so high. However, when he thought that Sun Xiaoguang was doing it for work, he did not refuse. Instead, he quickly nodded and said, "Okay, I will think of a way." Originally, he wanted to bargain, but he did not expect that the sixth young master would agree. Sun Xiaoguang was very happy and nodded repeatedly to express his gratitude. You don't have to thank me. You are doing this to do a good job. I can find a way to move 2 million people out for you, but you have to remember that once this place is restored to its original state, there will still be outsiders who want to move in. At that time, you are not allowed to talk about conditions and difficulties. Yang Qindong gave a warning in advance. Sixth young master, don't worry. I know. Sun Xiaoguang stood at attention and promised. Now that Cambodia was just established, it needed the help of others. In the future, when they became stronger, they would naturally help other regions. Sun Xiaoguang was very clear about this. Not long after, Sun Xiaoguang left happily, leaving Yang Qindong standing there looking at the map with his brows furrowed. Looking at his current forces, needless to say, Qiqian City was the place where the Han people gathered. People from Cambodia were not qualified to go there, so they could be excluded. Shur City had the smallest population, about 200,000. However, it was not rich in resources, so it was difficult to be self-sufficient. Therefore, he could not send a large number of people there. Vietnamese province already had a population of 3 million. It was not impossible to accommodate more people, but it would only increase the burden there. The same was true for Lao province, which had a population of 3 million. It also needed development, but it could not absorb more people. Since these forces could not do it, he could not throw the 2 million people that Sun Xiaoguang proposed to move into the sea. Wait, see. Yang Chendong's mind flashed an idea in an instant. Then his eyes fell on the sea. In a few breaths, layers of ideas formed in his mind. Then he punched the place marked on the map as Luzon Island with a smile in his eyes. In ancient times, Luzon Island was a small country called Luzon. Since the Song and Yuan dynasties, China's merchant ships often came here to trade. China's ancient books called it Little Luzon. There were special articles in the East and West Western Studies, and Ming history, foreign biographies. In the third year of the Ming Yongle dynasty 1405, the eunuch of the Three Guarantees, Zheng He, led a huge fleet to Luzon. He was appointed as the governor of Luzon by the Yongle emperor. He was in charge of the country's politics, economy, military, and culture. He served for 20 years, 1405 to 1424. During this period, Su spared no effort to promote the Chinese culture. He implemented the rule of Confucianism and benevolence. He spread the advanced technology of agriculture, fishing, industry, and commerce in southern Min. He promoted shipbuilding, textile, pottery, tea, and other industries, making outstanding contributions to the social stability, economic development, and cultural prosperity of Luzon. Today, Luzon Island was still considered one of the vassal states of the Great Ming Dynasty. After the north and south were clearly separated, their strength was greatly reduced. In addition, they had forbidden the sea for many years. They had lost their original deterrence to Luzon Island. Luzon Island had become an isolated place, so why not occupy it for their own use? In fact, in 1450, the Arab merchant Said Abu Bakr had already established an Islamic regime in the southern part of Luzon Island. In the future, history would call this place the Philippines. Now they were only building their own forces on the southern island. Once they had a firm foothold, even if they didn't take over Luzon Island, other forces would also be tempted. Since that was the case, why should he be polite? The only thing he needed to worry about was that once the news of occupying Luzon Island spread back to the Ming Dynasty, would it affect the current relationship between the two sides? After all, Luzon Island was not far from the Ming Dynasty. The previous governor was appointed by the Ming Dynasty. If the news of the mercenaries occupying Luzon Island spread back, there would definitely be ministers who would raise doubts and bring trouble. Yang Chendong was not afraid of trouble, but it was always good to avoid trouble. Suddenly, Yang Chendong thought of something and asked Beta Persei, who was standing next to him. Beta Persei, I remember that we seem to have captured 20 large and medium-sized warships from Spain, right? Yes, young master. Those warships are very different from our warships. They have been sent to the shipyard in Chang City for research. Beta Persei didn't know what was going on, but he still answered truthfully. Very good. Send a telegram to Commander Gao Xiong immediately. Tell him that I want to see him, and ask him to come quickly. Yang Chendong nodded. Learning from each other's strengths to make up for one's weaknesses was what he taught the technicians in Chang City. They were able to combine it with reality, which made him very pleased. Of course, he was even happier about the great use these 20 warships would bring to him. Beta Persei sent the telegram. 3 days later, Commander Gao Xiong rushed all the way from the sea to the port of Kampot. Then he rode all the way to the palace of Cambodia and saw Yang Chendong. Chapter 931. As soon as the two sides met, Yang Chendong pointed to the Luzon Island area on the sand table and asked Gao Xiong, "How is it? Do you have the confidence to conquer this place in one bite?" Gao Xiong, who looked at the sand table, was surprised. Luzon Island? Yes, it's Luzon Island. Yang Chendong nodded in agreement. Gao Xiong did not answer immediately. Instead, he thought for a moment before replying. Sixth young master, our people have landed on this island more than once. We are very clear about the situation inside. Their defense is very weak. There is no problem in taking them down. However, there are many Han people there, and they have a close relationship with the Great Ming Dynasty. If we attack them, I'm afraid. Gao Xiong did not continue, but the meaning was very clear. If they attacked Luzon Island, it would cause dissatisfaction from the Great Ming Dynasty. Now, all the supply and demand of the first city had to pass through the land of Baiming. Once the relationship was strained, there would be no benefits between them. It doesn't matter. Times have changed. With our current strength, we can't launch an attack on the southern Baiming dynasty, but we can still wipe out some of the forces in the periphery. Besides, this time we don't have to use the banner of mercenaries. You know that your 3rd Sea Division captured 20 Spanish ships before, right? Yang Chendong only gave a slight hint, but Gao Xiong immediately understood the meaning behind it. He immediately said, 6th Young Master, you want to arrange them to attack Luzon Island? Oh, I understand. Please rest assured, 6th Young Master. I will prepare it immediately. I promise that no one will know about it. This is our intention. Be good. Commander Gao, this time we have dealt with the Spanish ships. I believe that it won't be long before they send more people. In addition, the Portuguese ships are still wandering in this area. No matter how good the things are, it won't be enough for so many people to share it. What's more, this young master has never thought of sharing with them. Even if one day the conditions permit, we will go out and occupy more places, so the construction of the navy is not waiting for us. Just one army is not enough. Does the 6th young master mean that he wants to form an army? Gao Xiong was smart, and he immediately understood the hidden meaning behind those words. Yes. Next, they would need to form another army, but there would be more armies in the future. In the future, when the armies were combined, they would still need to form a division. There was still a long way to go. As for you, you have to be prepared to shoulder the heavy burden. After we take down Luzon Island, we will establish the Navy headquarters. At that time, you will be the first deputy commander. Yang Chendong patted Gao Xiong's shoulder. Gao Xiong was steady, had a strong view of the big picture, and was good at commanding. He was someone who could shoulder heavy responsibilities. Hearing this grand plan, Gao Xiong felt his blood boil. He stood at attention and said, 6th young master, don't worry. I'll go back and prepare immediately. At the same time, there will be a selection of Navy soldiers in Resin City. In fact, we have been doing this kind of work, but because the number of soldiers we need is limited, we didn't do it with great fanfare. But it's not a problem to form an army in a short time. Very good. At least the candidate for the commander of the 2nd Army, in the name of the Navy headquarters, let me have a look. Yang Chendong did what he said and put the task of forming the 2nd Army on the agenda. In Yang Chendong's view, if he wanted to expand his strength, it was not enough to just do it on land. In addition, the Eastern world had been exposed and could face all kinds of unexpected events or even provocations at any time. The expansion of the Navy was also necessary. Gao Xiong left. Only 10 days later, 10 warships with red, yellow, and red rectangular flags sailed on the sea and went straight in the direction of Luzon Island. It seemed that this was just a simple voyage, but no one knew that all the officers and soldiers of the 1st Sea Division were curled up on these 10 ships, giving a very crowded feeling. This time, it was the 1st Sea Division that received the task. This was also Gao Xiong's idea. Since the Navy was going to establish a 2nd Army, then who would be the commander of the 1st Sea Division? As the commander of the 1st Sea Division and the first deputy commander of the Navy headquarters, of course, he had to express his opinion. The commander of the 1st Sea Division, Yu Guang, was one of the first people to follow him. He was also one of the first people to follow the 6th young master. He had the ability and qualifications, so he chose this person as the candidate for the commander of the 2nd Sea Division. This time, the capture of Luzon Island gave him an opportunity to show his face in front of the 6th young master. Yu Guang naturally grasped the opportunity given to him by the army commander. After receiving the order, he and the 4 regiment commanders of the 1st Sea Division, as well as the staff officers, repeatedly studied Luzon Island and formulated what they thought was the most perfect battle plan. When the 10 ships with the Spanish flag arrived at the northernmost dock of Luzon Island on the pretext of trade, the 4th Sea Division was responsible for controlling the port. The 1st, 2nd, and 3rd Sea Division launched a lightning raid from 3 different directions, and soon controlled most of the areas around the Kagul River. The Luzon government, which originally only had 50,000 soldiers and was still spread out for defense, fell in just 5 days. The already declining Governor Chun Rong was captured alive, and the entire Luzon Island became a new territory for the mercenaries. On the 2nd day after Luzon changed its flag, a large number of ships with the flag of 5 stars suddenly appeared. They surrounded the 10 ships with the flag of Spain, and after a fierce battle, they destroyed them. The main commander, Miguel, and the deputy commander, Cruz, were captured and then taken away in public. This scene was witnessed by many merchants at the northern port of Luzon. At this point, the plan was successfully completed. Yang Chendong used the 2 captured enemy generals and the 10 ships to act and reasonably occupy Luzon Island. They had defeated the Western powers and returned safely to Luzon Island. When the news spread, even if the Southern and Southern Ming dynasties knew about it, they could not say anything. As for why the mercenaries did not leave and instead sent troops to guard the place, it was easier to explain. After all, this place had become the target of other countries. They only stayed to better protect this place. After Luzon Island became Yang Chendong's new power, they expanded the northern dock according to his request and renamed it Port Luzon. At the same time, a new city, Luzon City, was built on the island. Li Sheng, who was recommended by Yu Qian, was the first city lord. Because the population of Luzon Island was not large at that time, only a little more than 1 million, in order to strengthen the construction here and prosper the economy, 2 million people were transferred from Cambodia. At this point, Yang Chendong had fulfilled his promise to Governor Sun Xiaoguang. After Luzon Island became a member of Yang Chendong's sphere of influence, they had successfully taken control of the Ming Dynasty's South China Sea. Relying on Ryukyu Island, Luzon Island, and the docks and harbors of Yunnan Province, they had formed a pocket above the sea. Without their consent, any ships of any power that entered this place might face a heavy blow from 3 sides. The mission of capturing Luzon Island was successfully completed. The time came to May of 1454 AD. At this time, the second wife, Qiao Yin, was about to give birth. Yang Chendong gave up all military affairs and returned to Chinan City to accompany Qiao Yin, who was about to give birth, to wait for the birth of his first child. Yang Chendong stopped, and the provinces under his power also settled down. Those that should be developed continued to develop, and those that should be stabilized seized the time to stabilize. The Navy headquarters also passed a resolution to build the Second Sea Army, appointing Yue Guang as the commander. There were 4, 5, and 6 naval divisions under his command, with a total of more than 26,000 officers. At the same time, it was announced that from today onwards, the mercenaries would be renamed the 5-Star Army, and it was announced to the world. The mercenaries changed their name to the 5-Star Army, which was definitely a big deal. However, there were not many people who really paid attention to this at the moment. Everything was following Yang Chendong's attack on the Phnom Penh dynasty. The various forces also took the opportunity to seek opportunities to seize their own benefits. Shortly after learning the news that the mercenaries launched an attack on the Phnom Penh dynasty, the king of Minzhuang, Zhu Huiqiu, proclaimed himself King Nanming and announced to the world. Not long after, he sent troops to Yunnan, where King Mu Bin of Shiping was located. For King Nanming, Zhu Huiqiu, his location was not satisfactory. To the north and east, there was Baiming's army, to the west there was King Mu's army, and to the south, there was the mercenaries' territory of Yunnan Province. He was surrounded on all sides, and there was not even a safe way out. Once something happened, wouldn't his life be in danger? In order to solve this problem, he was bound to kill his way out. After thinking about it, he set his target on Yunnan, where King Shiping was located. This was also a last resort. Relatively speaking, among the 3 forces that surrounded him, King Shiping was the easiest to bully. In order to achieve the goal of one hit, Zhu Huiqiu mobilized 100,000 troops and gave a heavy blow to Mu Bin, who was under Yunnan, without warning. Unfortunately, because the news was leaked in advance, he did not achieve the goal of one hit. He only managed to severely injure Mu Bin. However, just as King Nanming wanted to take down the entire Yunnan, Nanming sent troops. For a time, King Nanming, who had to fight on both sides, quickly changed from offense to defense. The battle was in a state of stalemate for a while. At this time, the Vietnamese general under the mercenaries, Hong Jin, led his troops out of Lang Son and watched the three sides fight. Hong Jin's appearance not only meant that Yang Chendong behind him was paying attention to this matter, but also that he had to do a very important thing, which was to take care of the people who were injured during and after the war. As long as they were Han people, they would take them in and arrange their lives for them. Compared to the last time when he spent 10 million taels of silver to buy Baiming, Yang Chendong did not spend money this time. Instead, he just picked people up. Facts had already proven that every time a piece of land was occupied, a large number of Han people would be needed to occupy it. Although after the last incident, Yang Chendong still had more than 3 million Han people in his hands. Compared to the expansion of his forces, this number was clearly not enough. Chapter 932. Restoring the glory of the Han people and bringing them to the top of the world had always been Yang Chendong's life goal that had never changed. In order to achieve this goal, he needed more Han people. He needed to spread them everywhere like seeds. Seeking more Han people to join him in the war was a very good way. The mercenaries began to take in the Han people and arrange for their food, clothing, housing, and transportation. Under the arrangement of the two major intelligence agencies, this matter quickly spread throughout the battlefield. For a time, many Han people who had been affected by the war and had no home to return to seemed to have found the light. They thought of ways to rush to Langshan from where they originally were. They knew that once they could get there, all the problems in front of them would be solved. Their lives would have hope again, and their lives would be guaranteed. The mercenaries' approach quickly attracted the attention of Emperor Nanming, Prince Nanming, and Prince Shiping who were fighting. When they saw that they were not spending money to buy people, but relying on the war to recruit people, they naturally disagreed wholeheartedly. They tried their best to stop them, and even maliciously spread some rumors that once they reached Langshan, it would be difficult for them to survive. It was better to continue to stay in their hometown. The three forces actually reached an agreement on this matter, and the impact was naturally not small. Some people who originally did not want to leave their hometown naturally chose to stay. However, when the war continued, the people found that they had land but could not farm. When they had money but could not buy food, the thought of leaving arose. However, due to the uncertainty of the government, they began to use various methods. Some sneaked away, some spent money to buy passage from the soldiers. In short, they had to leave this place. They had to leave this place where they could lose their lives at any time in the war. As a result, there would be people rushing from all directions to the entrance of Langshan every day. General Hong Jin had prepared a large amount of food and was waiting for them. As long as these people appeared here, they would be safe. It was equivalent to being protected by him. Since Hong Jin was backed by a powerful mercenary group, none of the three forces dared to provoke him. This place had really become a paradise, a safe place far away from the flames of war. For a time, the number of people under Yang Chendong's influence began to slowly increase. Every few days, General Hong Jin would arrange for soldiers to escort these Han people to the seaside wharf in Yunnan province. Naturally, there would be a naval battle waiting for them there. They would be sent to the safest place, Qiqian City. Zhu Qiyu and Zhu Qizhen of the Ying sect were truly brothers. The southern Ming Empire had already started the war, and the northern Ming Empire was also preparing for war. Daizong issued an edict to change the name of the northern Ming Empire's territory to Liaodong. At the same time, he recruited 100,000 cavalrymen from there for the expedition to the west. At the same time, they also bought war horses in Liaodong. They wanted to build a strong cavalry force to the world. However, the number of war horses in the Liaodong region was limited, and many of them had to be purchased from various forces in the grassland. If one were to talk about who was the strongest in the Mongol Empire and who had the most horses, it would undoubtedly be First City. Shiqing was built by Yang Chendong with a lot of effort. In terms of personal effort, it was far more than Qiqian City. For Qiqian City, he only took out a lot of things from the warehouse and put forward some feasible suggestions. It was far from Shiqing, which was built by him alone. Shurcheng was the first Siamese city built by Yang Chendong on the grassland. It had political significance and symbolic significance. It was also the economic and cultural center that he built personally. It was a model city. Not only did it have the largest commercial street in the grassland, but it was also the largest vegetable base, grain foundation, and war horse breeding base in the grassland. As early as when the city was being built, Yang Chendong spent a lot of money to buy a lot of stallions at a high price. He also hired many experienced horse breeders to breed and cultivate the war horses. After 2 years, there were finally results. The number of war horses began to increase, and Shurcheng became the largest war horse breeding base in the grassland. In fact, the breeding of war horses was not difficult. As long as there were talents and materials, it could be built. Moreover, the climate of the grassland was suitable for the growth of war horses. However, other people could not do this. It was not that they were not determined enough, but that they did not invest enough. Just like when the Tang Empire was established, because they invested enough, the war horses were quickly cultivated, which led to the defeat of the Turks. Now, with strong financial resources and the existence of the mercenary army, there was no need to worry about anyone targeting them. The scale of the war horse breeding base was getting bigger and bigger, so Bai Ming had no choice but to target them. Naturally, even if Bai Ming had such thoughts, he would not dare to openly snatch it. According to the report of the Xian Mansion's chief soldier, Shi Wanshan, the combat strength of the mercenary army in the first city was very strong. Just the combat strength of a new army was daunting. Not to mention, there were more than 20,000 mercenary cavalry in the North Desert City, which was thousands of miles away from the first city. Once there was danger here, the other party would arrive in less than 3 days. If one wanted to snatch it by force, there would be no other result other than asking for trouble. Since they could not rob them, they could only consider spending money to buy them. However, Bai Ming's money was used on the training of millions of new soldiers and the development of guns and cannons. How much money would they have to buy war horses? Moreover, the price of a good war horse was not cheap. It must be said that there were indeed some talents in northern Ming. Soon, there were ministers who proposed to buy horses on credit. For example, they were willing to use the future expenses of the mercenaries to offset the cost. There were also people who proposed to borrow money from the Yang family bank in northern Ming. Since businessmen could take a loan, why couldn't Bai Ming do it? These suggestions made Zhu Qiyu, who was having a headache, overjoyed. He immediately agreed. On one hand, he arranged for Chief Eunuch Jin Ing to negotiate with the person in charge of the Yang family bank in the capital. On the other hand, he sent an urgent message to Deng Chong, who was guarding Xian City, to go to Shurcheng City to negotiate. In short, no matter what method was used, as long as they could get the war horses, it would be a great achievement. In Zhu Qiyu's view, he was the emperor of a country. Whatever he wanted, he would definitely get it. However, in front of the mercenary army, this thought was broken. In short, the mercenary army only recognized money and not people. Deng Chong was naturally rebuffed. City Lord Yu Mian's answer was very simple. Considering that they were all Han people and Yang Chendong was the Duke of Loyalty, they were not outsiders. The war horses could be sold to them, but they had to take out enough money. Otherwise, there was nothing to talk about. The Yang family bank was even simpler. You borrowed 5 million taels of silver from us last year, and haven't returned a single cent. How can we lend you money now? This was not in line with the development of business, and was not allowed. The two sides that had high hopes were both heavily damaged. This result made Zhu Qiyu very depressed and angry. He felt that he had lost face. However, he did not have the courage of his ancestors and did not have the strength of his ancestors. Facing the mercenary army that was not weaker than them, he could not do anything. At this time, the North Korean envoy came to Bai Ming and came to pay tribute like in the past. All of this happened because of this tribute. In 1338 AD, the Goryeo king sent Li Qingui to attack the new Urgan-Dusi region. Li Qingui took the chance to start a coup. In 1392 AD, Li Qingui deposed the Goryeo king and became the king himself. He changed the name of the country to North Korea and set the capital as Hanyang, modern Seoul. The North Korean dynasty promoted Confucianism and rejected Buddhism, adopting the doctrine of the big picture towards the Great Ming, that is, pledging allegiance to the Great Ming. This was one of the reasons why Ming Taizu declared not to conquer the country. North Korea and the Great Ming Dynasty were both non-conquering countries, but North Korea had a closer relationship with the Great Ming Dynasty. This might be due to their geographical location. Since the establishment of North Korea, every king had to be recognized by the Great Ming Dynasty before they could ascend the throne and be regarded as the legitimate ruler. The relationship between the two sides was so good that when North Korea sent an envoy to pay tribute, the Baiming emperor would give them face and meet him. This time was no different from the past. Zhu Qiyu still wanted to meet the North Korean envoy as usual. The difference was that the envoy this time was not sent by the sixth king of North Korea, Li Hongwa. Instead, it was a subordinate of Li Hongwa's uncle, Lord Shoyang. At this time, North Korea was going through the Guthu Jing disaster. The so-called Guthu Jing disaster happened during the reign of Emperor Duanzong of North Korea. It was an incident where Emperor Duanzong's uncle, Lord Shoyang, usurped the throne in a coup. In essence, it was a matter of the North Korean royal family killing each other. The imperial court of the Northern Ming Dynasty had also received news from the secret agents of the embroidered uniform guard that they had sent there. However, considering that this was another country's internal affairs, and that the Northern Ming Dynasty had many headaches, they did not pay much attention to it. Perhaps the Baiming imperial court already knew. Or perhaps they did not know and did not care. In short, the current situation in North Korea was gradually becoming clear. Li Hongwa's faction had the upper hand. This time, Zheng Linji, who came as a special envoy, was the person Li Hongwa valued the most. Zheng Linji had just been appointed by Li Hongwa before he came to Baiming. He was the leader of the North Korean Dynasty's highest administrative organization, the parliamentary government. He was at the first rank and was equivalent to the Prime Minister or Prime Minister of China. Sending such an important minister over was only for one thing. That was, once Li Meng completely defeated Li Hongxian, he would have a legitimate reason to request Northern Ming to make Li Meng the new king. Zhu Qiyu, who was at the banquet, did not care about the North Korean matter. Perhaps in his opinion, it was not a big deal. North Korea was just a small country and did not deserve his attention. However, Zheng Linji, who felt good about himself, did not think this way. When he came, Li Hongwa told him that in order to get Baiming's support, he could do some things to show their existence. For example, the issue of mercenaries. Chapter 933. During the banquet, seeing that Dai Zong and Zhu Qiyu were not in high spirits, and even when they were drinking, Zheng Linji asked in a low voice, "Great Emperor of the Great Ming Dynasty, is there something bothering you? Why don't you tell me? Maybe I can help you with some ideas." You. Zhu Qiyu raised his head slightly and sneered. He didn't mean to look down on North Korea, but he clearly looked down on North Korea. In his eyes, he never treated North Korea as a dish. If he couldn't solve the problem, what could the other party do? Zheng Linji didn't get angry when he saw Zhu Qiyu's disregard. He knew very well that his identity couldn't enter the other party's eyes. It's just that he came with a mission, so even if he didn't want to talk, he had to. Seeing that Zhu Qiyu didn't intend to speak again, he took the initiative to say, "Great Emperor of the Great Ming Dynasty, I guess that you have a headache because of the war horse?" Zhu Qiyu, who didn't care at first, became more focused this time, and when he looked at Zheng Linji, he became more formal. Seeing that he had successfully attracted the other party's attention, Zheng Linji was happy and continued, "If it's because of this matter, I really have a way." Oh! This time, Zhu Qiyu was even more surprised. He didn't expect that a small vassal state's minister would have some knowledge. If it was in the past, maybe he wouldn't care. But now, with a desperate mentality, he nodded and said, "Okay, then let's go to the palace after the banquet." "Thank you, Great Emperor of the Great Ming Dynasty." Zheng Linji nodded happily. He was excited that he had taken the first step. Thinking that this time he could get the attention of the Great Ming Dynasty's emperor, then there would be no twists and turns and problems when Li Ji was conferred the title of king in the future. The banquet seemed to be particularly enthusiastic because of Zheng Linji's unexpected action, especially the emperor, whose face had been ugly for a long time, seemed to have forgotten his troubles at this moment, and there was a smile on his face. The other ministers didn't know the reason, so they could only make various guesses in their hearts. After the banquet, Zheng Linji was still sent back to the relay station by the carriage. However, the others did not know that he had already gotten off the carriage halfway and was heading straight for the palace. The mercenaries, or rather the 5-star army, were getting stronger and stronger. Zhu Qiyu felt a strong sense of crisis. Therefore, he didn't dare to trust anyone in a meeting like this. He just let the chief eunuch Jining take care of everything. When he saw Zheng Linji in the palace, Zhu Qiyu's expression had returned to its usual calm. Greetings to the great emperor of the great Ming Dynasty. As soon as he entered the side hall, Zheng Linji knelt on the ground with a pious expression. Envoy, there's no need to be so courteous. Why don't you talk about what you discussed with me earlier? Zhu Qiyu stretched out his hand and gestured for them to rise. Thank you, Your Majesty. Zheng Linji slowly got up from the ground and explained his plan. If they want war horses, the best place to get them is naturally in the beginning city. Unfortunately, they have already forgotten who gave them everything they have. There is no land under the heavens. The actions of the 5-star army are indeed rebellious. Okay, Envoy, you don't have to judge these. Let's talk about your plan, Zhu Qiyu said with displeasure. The 5-star army had already disobeyed his orders. This was naturally a provocation to the imperial power. He was not happy, so why would he bother others to talk about it in front of him? After Zheng Linji was reminded of this, his expression showed a bit of nervousness. He knew that he had to get some solid goods after all. Otherwise, he was afraid that the great Ming emperor would drive him away. Your Majesty, although there are many war horses in the beginning city, and they can even be said to be strong, they have a fatal flaw. That is, everything they need must be transported by sea. As long as we can cut off this route, it is equivalent to holding down his weak spot. At that time, won't Your Majesty be in control? Sea route. Listening to this proposal that was not very new, Zhu Qiyu shook his head with a trace of disappointment on his face. Envoy, you are wrong. The leader of the 5-star army is the loyal Duke of the Great Ming Dynasty. Why would I fight with him? Besides, the Great Ming Dynasty has been forbidden to go to sea for many years. There are no more ships. Your Majesty doesn't have any, but North Korea does. As long as Your Majesty agrees, this matter can be done by us. When the time comes, you can push all the responsibility to us. When the 5-star army agrees to Your Majesty's request, we will remove the blockade. In this way, they can't do anything about it. Zheng Linji said with a complacent look. These words were not said casually. It was the result of a long investigation by the North Korean Navy. Every time, the ships of the 5-star army would pass through their waters. After observation, they found that the other party seemed to be very careless. Every time, they only saw transport ships and did not see any escort ships. The number of ships of the 5-star army would not be many at a time, only about 30 ships. This strength was really not in the eyes of the North Korean Navy. If they suddenly attacked, there was a 90% chance that they would sink and cause heavy damage. Once this supply line was cut off by the sea, the position of the 5-star army would be awkward. At this time, Northern Ming was the mediator as one of the great powers of the Celestial Empire. Naturally, they could appear with a condescending attitude and propose some conditions for the exchange. After all, North Korea was a vassal state of Beiming. They would listen to them. With just one word, they could restore the sea route. For the sake of the 5-star army on the grassland, they had to pay some price. Zhu Qiyu wanted to think about these things again in his mind. Then he looked at Zheng Linji with a little more warmth in his eyes. Envoy Zheng, I heard that the situation in North Korea is a little unstable now. Replying to the great emperor of the Great Ming Dynasty, it's just a small problem. Our King Li Gu will be able to solve it soon. Zheng Linji knew that the critical moment had arrived. Okay, wait for the problem over there to be solved. I, Beiming, will confer Li Gu as the King of North Korea. Zhu Qiyu spat out, giving the other party a guarantee. This was exactly what Zheng Linji wanted. He immediately knelt on the ground again. "Long live the great Ming Dynasty's emperor. Ha, you may rise," Zhu Qiyu said in a good mood. Finally, there was an opportunity to curb the development of the five-star army. Moreover, he didn't have to do anything himself. In other words, if any problems occurred during this period, he could naturally stay out of it. He would definitely agree to something that didn't require him to do anything and could still benefit from. Zheng Linji left happily. The next morning he hurriedly left Baiming's capital and rushed back to North Korea. An operation to repair the sea route of the five-star army's transport ships immediately began preparations. Because only Zhu Qiyu, Chief Eunuch Ji Ning, and Zheng Linji were present during the secret meeting, this matter didn't leak out in Baiming, the capital of North Korea, Seoul, also known as Hanyang. In 1392, the Ri family established the Joseon dynasty and moved the capital to Yangzhou in 1394. In order to express his admiration for the Han dynasty, not the Han dynasty, and his determination to serve the Han dynasty wholeheartedly, Ri Qinggue wrote a letter to the Hongwu emperor, Zhu Yuanzong, requesting that Yangzhou be renamed Seoul. The Guzhou crisis was coming to an end. The power of the sixth king Ri Hongwu was being weakened step by step. Ri Honggua's uncle Lord Shouyang had the upper hand. Now Zheng Linji had rushed back from Baiming and brought the support of the emperor of Baiming. The next step was to replace him. Li Hongwu, who had already seized the military and political power, now had the entire Korean navy in his hands. After hearing Zheng Linji's report, he summoned another important minister, Han Mingjin, to discuss the matter of the navy intercepting the five-star army's transport ships. Han Mingjin, born in 1415, was a Korean and was a famous minister in the early years of the Joseon dynasty. He helped Li Hongwu plan the Guzhou crisis and finally seized the throne. He was called Zhang Liang by Li Hongwu. The three of them discussed the important matter in the study. After an hour, Han Mingjin left first. He had become the commander of this operation. Now he had to make many preparations for the sea operation. Seeing him leave in a hurry, Zheng Linji walked out with Li Hongwu. "Lord, Han Mingjin doesn't seem to agree with us taking action against the five-star army. You still sent him to command the battle at this time. Will there be any accidents?" Wherever there were people, there would be fighting. Korea's territory was not large and its population was not large, but when it came to fighting, it was very experienced. Just like Zheng Linji and Han Mingjin. Although they were both Li Honggua's subordinates, they still disliked each other and fought among themselves. Li Hongwu was a smart person. He naturally saw these things, but he did not say anything to stop it. It was not that he did not have the ability to stop it, but he was happy to see it happen. He needed a balance. This might be a common method used by the emperor to control his subordinates. There won't be any meaning. Mingjin is just worried that the five-star army will take revenge on us. But this time, we have Baiming's support. How would they dare to act recklessly? Since he has taken on this responsibility, he will naturally do a good job. This time we just need to wait for good news. Li Hongwu said confidently. Perhaps he was confident in the plan this time, or perhaps he was confident in the Korean Navy, or perhaps he simply looked down on the five-star army's strength. It was only a force that originated from the great Ming dynasty's duke. Could it really scare him? He really did not know what the Baiming emperor was thinking. He couldn't even control a subject. It was no wonder that the great Ming dynasty was divided. Of course, Li Hongwu did not know that he was looking at the sky from the bottom of a well. He also did not know that his stupid arrogance had caused him to provoke an opponent. The entire Korea would be completely destroyed because of his actions. Chapter 934. As usual, a fleet of 30 ships was passing through the Korean Strait between North Korea and the Japanese Empire. The five-star flag hanging high in the sky showed their identity. Chu Gang, the second commander of the 3rd Division, was looking ahead with his binoculars from time to time. Chu Gang was originally just a battalion commander. He worked his way up from the bottom of the ranks. A while ago, when he was dealing with the Kim Bien dynasty, he made a great contribution and was promoted to the commander of the 2nd Division. This was also his first time escorting and transporting supplies as a commander. Now that he had become a regiment commander, His status was different from before. The phrase "stand higher and see further" was exactly what he was feeling at this moment. Looking ahead, North Korean ships would appear in the Korean Strait from time to time, which made him very unhappy. Humph, these annoying flies. I didn't like them when I passed by here before. I will find a chance to teach them a lesson. He had been on this transport route several times before, but not as a commander. Even when he saw North Korean ships staring at them, he just didn't like it. But now he was a commander. According to the rules of the cold front, he could now submit a report to the 6th young master. He decided to finish the mission and go back to explain the dangers of North Korea. Although he didn't think that the other party would dare to do anything to him, the feeling of being watched was very uncomfortable. The fleet continued to pass through the strait. The number of North Korean ships was increasing, reaching more than 200 ships. Chu Gang, who was standing in the command room, felt a little strange. What's going on? How come there are so many North Korean ships this time? They won't dare to attack us. A staff officer next to him answered aloud. Anyone could hear the arrogance in his voice. What was the cold front? It represented the strongest combat power. So far, except for the 1st Cavalry Division, which was personally appointed by the 6th young master, they didn't think highly of any other army. For the staff officer's words, everyone nodded in agreement, including Chu Gang. They didn't think that anyone would dare to attack them. Or rather, someone dared to do it, but it definitely shouldn't be the North Korean Navy that they had always looked down on. Regardless of whether you believe it or not, more and more North Korean ships appeared, and they came within 100 meters of the ship under the flag that they wanted the mercenaries to stop the ship for inspection. No matter what, this was the other party's territory. Although they had never been inspected before, they actually had the right to make such a request. In the face of this reasonable request, for a time, many ships couldn't help but slow down, some even stopped. Oh no, they might really attack. Immediately send out the signal flag to inform the other ships to pass through quickly. At the same time, prepare the cannons to fire. Chu Gang quickly reacted after a scream in his heart, especially when he saw the North Korean ships accelerating towards his fleet through the binoculars. The bad feeling grew stronger and stronger. After the order was given, the flag bearers quickly rushed to the bow of the ship to convey the commander's orders. At this moment, the North Korean ships that were approaching also began to move. They first accelerated and rushed to the side of the 5-star Army's fleet. Then, in a planned manner, 7 or 8 ships surrounded one of the 5-star Army's ships. The deck of the ship was filled with North Korean soldiers holding bows and arrows. When the distance was less than 100 meters, the bows and arrows rained down like rain. The long-prepared attack began. They didn't prepare, or rather, they didn't think that a small North Korean would dare to attack them. The moment they met the enemy, the 5-star Army suffered a loss. A few of the 5-star Army officers that were prepared to shout were shot by arrows, either dead or injured. This was a battle that they weren't prepared for, and it was also an unequal battle. Since they weren't prepared, and the number of ships was 8-1, the 2nd Regiment of the 3rd Sea Division fell into a difficult situation as soon as they met the enemy. Dozens of officers and soldiers were caught off guard and shot by the arrows. They either fell to the ground or fell into the hands of the soldiers. The 5-star Army, which only had 2 battalions guarding the ships, fell into a disadvantageous position. Considering the fact that they had to escort more supplies, the 2nd Regiment didn't send out all of its members. The 1st Regiment only sent out 2 battalions of the 5 battalions. Even with the addition of the commander and some officers, there were only about 800 people. Divided into 30 ships, there were less than 30 soldiers on each ship. The North Korean Navy sent out more than 200 ships and more than 10,000 soldiers. This kind of disparity, in addition to the fact that one side came prepared and the other was unprepared, the battle instantly became one-sided. After the North Korean ships gained the upper hand, they quickly began to close in. When the distance between them was less than 20 meters, a large wooden plank that had been prepared beforehand was thrown out, forming a temporary passage between the 2 ships. Fire the cannons. Commander Zhou Gang on the main ship saw that the situation was getting worse and worse. He first took a gun from the staff officer beside him and shouted. At this moment his eyes were red. The fleet was under attack, and as the commander here, if he couldn't solve the problem, then whether he returned or not, only death would await him. Whether it was for his duty or for the dignity of Lung Feng, he couldn't afford to hesitate at this moment. Commander, our ships are too close to the enemy's ships. If we fire now, we might hurt our own people. When the cannoneer heard the order, his face was first shocked, then he said with difficulty, "Don't worry so much, the ships that stopped have no chance of leaving. Even if the soldiers die, we can't let them and their supplies fall into the hands of the North Koreans. Quickly fire the cannons." The situation was so tense that Zhou Gang didn't have time to think about so many problems. What he needed to do now was to fire the cannons at the North Korean Navy, and then take advantage of the chaos to buy time for the other ships to retreat. Following the commander's order, the cannons sounded and landed on a North Korean ship, causing a huge explosion and flames to rise into the sky. At the same time, the soldiers of Lung Feng on the various ships began to fire back. Bullets flew out and landed in the North Korean Navy's camp, causing the soldiers to fall one after another. A chaotic battle had begun. Cannon fire came one after another. At this moment, Zhou Gang didn't want to save ammunition anymore. In order to turn the situation around, what he needed to do now was to use up all his ammunition in the shortest time possible to deal a heavy blow to the North Korean Navy and provide cover for the other ships to leave. It was obvious that it was impossible to continue forward. Commander Zhou Gang gave another order, so the ships turned around and sailed back to the sea. At this moment, it was impossible to complete the transportation mission. The only thing they could do was to minimize the losses. The bullets and arrows collided. If this was on land, with the advantages of guns, they could definitely fight back and retreat at the same time, causing heavy damage to the enemy. However, this was the sea. The space on the ship was limited, and there weren't many places to dodge. Many soldiers were forced to retreat to a corner, and were shot to death by the arrows. The battle had only lasted for half an hour, but the soldiers on 3 ships had already been killed, and the ships had been taken over by the North Korean Navy. Concentrate the last of the cannons and sink those 3 ships. With a face full of joy, Zhou Gang gave the order to fire his own ships. Since the ships had already been taken over by the enemy, they couldn't snatch them back. Now, they could only sink them and not let the enemy gain any benefits. At the same time, order the other ships to retreat quickly. Don't fight. Tell the soldiers that we will definitely take revenge today, but for now, we should immediately leave the battlefield. Zhou Gang's eyes were red as he gritted his teeth and ordered the fleet to retreat. Orders were issued one after another, and cannonballs flew down, hitting the 3 ships that were about to become their spoils of war. One of the cannonballs unfortunately landed on another ship that was retreating, and a raging fire seemed to illuminate this part of the sea. From the start of the battle to the end, it was less than 4 hours. The 5-star army had lost 4 warships, and more than 500 soldiers were dead or injured. This kind of loss was more than 50% of the naval battle. It was the greatest loss since the establishment of the Cold Front Navy. Zhou Gang, who had retreated far away, stood at the back of the ship. Looking at the huge fire in the distance, his eyes were red as he swore that he would definitely take revenge for today. He would definitely make the North Koreans pay a heavy price for what they had done today. Han Mingjin stood on the largest North Korean ship and looked at the 5-star army ships that were slowly retreating. He didn't say anything for a long time. "Sir, should we send someone to chase after them?" A Marine general came forward and asked. "No need. Our mission is to prevent them from passing through here. Now that we have achieved our goal, we can retreat." Han Mingjin shook his head and rejected the suggestion to continue chasing. Then a trace of worry appeared on his face, a power that even the great Ming Dynasty had to be wary of, and now they had taken the initiative to provoke them. What kind of consequences and effects would there be? Han Mingjin didn't dare to think about it, but his gut feeling told him that they seemed to have done something wrong this time. They seemed to have to pay a price for it. However, no matter how much Han Mingjin thought about it, he would never have thought that this would be the beginning of their North Korean destruction. From now on, there would be no North Korea in the world. Zhou Gang took advantage of the advanced nature of the ships and quickly left the battlefield. After leaving the Korean Straits with 26 ships, he reported the details of what had happened to the Navy headquarters in the form of a telegram. At the same time, he requested to be dealt with. The Navy headquarters telegram room was also in chaos after receiving this telegram. Vice Commander Gao Xiong, who was in charge, didn't believe the contents of the telegram. He didn't believe that someone would take the initiative to make an enemy of the five-star army. Chapter 935. Call back immediately and confirm if it's true. Hurry. Although Gao Xiong knew that the officers under him would not have the guts to make a false report, he still needed to confirm it. Soon the verified telegram was sent back. Zhou Gang used his head as a guarantee. Gao Xiong knew that things would not go wrong. He quickly said to the adjutant beside him, "Let's go to the palace." At this moment, the palace of Qiqian City was extremely tense. It was only because the second madam was about to give birth. According to the authoritative doctor, Zhao Yanmei, the child should be born in a few days. Because of this, the atmosphere in the palace was extremely tense. When someone walked past the second madam's palace, their footsteps would be much lighter, as if they were afraid that they would make a noise and disturb the madam. That would be too great a crime. Yang Chendong, who had always been calm in the face of trouble, also showed the nervousness of being a father at this moment. In both his previous life and this life, he had experienced a lot of bullets and seen countless moments of life and death. However, this was the first time he had his own child. People were always full of respect for the unknown. At this moment he was no exception. Nervousness and apprehension had been wrapping around him. Beta Persei changed his usual carefree attitude and carefully came to Yang Chendong's side and whispered, "Young master, Deputy Commander Gao is here. He said that he has something important to say to you." Yang Chendong, who was already a little nervous, frowned after hearing Beta Persei's words. No one did not know what time it was, but Gao Xiong still came. This was enough to show the importance of reporting. "Okay, tell him to wait in the side hall." In the side hall, Gao Xiong received the telegram from Zhou Gang and handed it to Yang Chendong. Then he lowered his head and said, "Sixth young master, I have sent a second telegram to confirm the authenticity of this matter." What a bold North Korean Navy. We did not go to find trouble with them, but they dared to find trouble with us. They really don't know what's good for them. Yang Chendong read the report. After seeing that 4 ships had sunk and nearly 500 soldiers had died, he suddenly slammed the table. His eyes were filled with a terrifying light. "Yes, I am also responsible for this matter. Our Marine headquarters has never paid attention to this problem. We always thought that no one would dare to do anything to us, so we were careless and gave the enemy an opportunity. I am sorry." Seeing that Yang Chendong was angry, Gao Xiong quickly bowed his head and admitted his mistake. The Marine headquarters is indeed responsible. Some people have been blinded by victory. This incident is a wake-up call for us. Underestimating the opponent at any time is a fatal behavior. You have to use this incident to reflect on yourselves. Yes, sixth young master. I will reflect on my actions. Knowing that Yang Chendong was greatly dissatisfied with this matter, Gao Xiong needed to express his stance. You don't need to reflect on yourself. This time, everyone is responsible. After you go back, immediately hold a meeting and carry out self-reflection activities. Then prepare for battle. Yang Chendong thought back to the last time he returned to Chosen City from Haijin. He saw the North Korean Navy in action. At that time, he felt that this was a problem, but he didn't expect the problem to erupt so quickly. Gao Xiong left quickly after receiving the order. Yang Chendong sat in the side hall and did not leave immediately. He still had to think about a problem. He had no contact with North Korea, and there was no hatred. Why did the other party choose to attack him? This did not make sense. Beta Persei, send a telegram to Yang San and ask him to send someone to find out which force North Korea has been in contact with recently. Also, let Yang San inform the North Korean Security Department and ask them to arrange the troops there. Conduct a detailed investigation of the strength of the army and report it to me. Yes, young master. Beta Persei agreed and turned to do it. Yang Chendong, on the other hand, threw this matter to the back of his mind and strode towards the backyard of the palace. The Cold Front Navy was raided by the North Korean Navy, and it was said that they suffered heavy losses. The news quickly spread, and then the 6th Division commanders of the Navy put down the things at hand and went straight to the Navy headquarters. In the headquarters, the division commanders arrived one by one, and then there were voices shouting to go to war and avenge the Navy. Gao Xiong explained to everyone that the 6th young master already knew about this matter, and all they had to do was wait for orders. At the same time, he called everyone together for a meeting to discuss which division or army should take action to wash away the shame of the Navy. Just as the Navy headquarters was boiling, a sharp cry came from the palace of Haijin. Yang Chendong's eldest daughter was born. It had a chubby face, 2 rows of curved eyebrows, a pair of big, bright eyes, a small nose, a pair of bodhisattva ears, a small, chubby mouth, and a round double chin under the mouth. Her hands were chubby, and her fingers were short and thick. She was very cute. Carefully hugging the eldest daughter in his arms, Yang Chendong couldn't close his mouth from smiling. Taking this opportunity, the eldest Madame Hu Yen came forward to ask for the name of the child. Yang Chendong had long been prepared. Previously, Zhao Yanmei had also said that it was very likely that this child would be a girl, so he said, "Her name will be Yang Jie, which means pure and kind. Her nickname will be Lele, and she will be happy for the rest of her life." Lele's voice made the palace really lively for a while. Yang Chendong also received the congratulations of the officials. On the 7th day of Lele's birth, he came from the palace to the Navy headquarters. At this time, the Navy headquarters was full of officers, and there were 2 generals with gold stars on their shoulders. They were the 1st Sea Army Commander Gao Xiong and the 2nd Sea Army Commander Yu Guang. "You're all here. Then sit down for the meeting." After Yang Chendong's eyes scanned the crowd, he sat down at the head of the table. The other officers, led by Gao Xiong, also sat down in their chairs. Each of them was in a dignified position, standing in a military posture. "Is Zhou Gang here? Tell me about the situation." After sitting down, Yang Chendong took the lead and said. As he spoke, Zhou Gang, who was in the last row of the meeting room, stood up. He was just a captain, and according to the rules, he was not qualified to participate in such a high-level meeting. It was only because he was a participant in this battle that he made an exception. "6th young master, the situation is like this." Although he had reported the ins and outs of the situation more than once since returning to Crimson City, this was the first time he reported in front of the 6th young master. After a quarter of an hour, Zhou Gang finished his report. In the end, he asked for instructions as a participant. "6th young master, this battle was completely unprepared. Many of our comrades died miserably. Facing the enemy who was already prepared, some of them did not even have the chance to shoot. But even so, none of them retreated. They fought with their fists, feet, and even teeth. They were very brave." "Okay, I understand. You can sit down." Yang Chendong looked at Zhou Gang with appreciation and nodded. Because of Zhou Gang's seat, the conference room quickly fell into silence again. But everyone's eyes fell on Yang Chendong at this moment. Obviously, they were all waiting for an order, an opportunity to take revenge on North Korea. Not letting everyone wait for long, under Yang Chendong's signal, Beta Persei first wrote some documents and sent them one by one to the 2 commanders and 6 division commanders. "Everyone take a look. This is the information from the Security Department. More than a month ago, North Korean envoy Zheng Linji entered Beiming's Kyoto to pay tribute. And it was also more than a month ago that Northern Ming had proposed to buy horses from the Prairie City. However, because they wanted to trade on credit, they were rejected by us." The 2 things that seemed to be unrelated were now mentioned by Yang Chendong together, and the faces of several officers became dark. So North Korea's attack at sea should have a lot to do with Beiming? Just as everyone's thoughts were changing, Yang Chendong once again gestured to Beta Persei, and another document and map were sent to the hands of the officers above the division level. These are 2 maps of North Korea obtained by the Intelligence Department. They clearly mark the deployment of the North Korean military forces. After comparison, the 2 pieces of information are consistent. It should be true and credible. If you have any opinions, you can speak up. What else is there to say? Of course we'll fight. This time, No matter who ordered the North Korean Navy to fire at our five-star army, it's a provocation. They should be prepared for our retaliation. Deputy Commander Gao Xiong was the first to speak. It seemed that Gao Xiong was a little agitated and even a little straightforward, but in fact, he had already expressed his attitude. The enemy this time was only the North Korean army, and it had nothing to do with Baiming. This was also the reason why Yang Qindong wanted to explain the North Korean diplomatic mission to Baiming to everyone first. If he didn't make some things clear now, the officers below would inevitably figure it out. If this matter was related to Baiming, then after the war with North Korea, would they fight Baiming? Even if the Great Ming Dynasty had been divided into the south, Baiming's territory was still not small. A lot of preparation was needed to take down Baiming. With Yang Xie's current strength, he didn't have the appetite to take down Baiming. It wasn't that the five-star army wasn't strong enough, but that Yang Xie wasn't strong enough. If they fought now, there was a high chance of winning the final victory. But what about after they successfully occupied it? How would they manage such a large territory? How would they arrange for the Han people? Yang Qindong's goal was to let the Han people live a good life. He wanted them to walk at the top of the world and become the most respected race in the world. If they only took down Baiming but couldn't manage it, and instead let the people live a bitter life, then it would go against his original intention. This wasn't what Yang Qindong wanted to see and hoped for. Chapter 936. Therefore, it's not that Baiming can't fight, but they must be prepared. It's best if they can receive it safely. Even if they can't, they must think about all kinds of things to deal with after the war. With the current strength of Yang Xie, he can't do this, so it's better not to move and continue to accumulate strength. This is one of the themes of Yang Qindong's meeting today. Fighting North Korea is fine, whether it's to show the dignity of the five-star army or to avenge the dead brothers. This war must be fought. But it must not involve other people, especially Baiming. No one is allowed to cause trouble, otherwise, it will be asking for trouble. Gao Xiong saw this and immediately expressed it with practical actions. Those who can become officers of the army and division are all smart people. They all stood up and expressed their opinions one by one. There is only one purpose, and that is, this time, only the North Korean army is targeting them, and they only want to fight the North Korean army. The strategic goal is set, then it's time to choose the army to fight. Under the leadership of Yang Qindong, the 2nd Marine Army got a chance to fight. This is also the opportunity that the 6th Young Master gave the 2nd Marine Army more opportunities to practice. Although the individual quality of the 2nd Marine Army soldiers is still very good, after all, they still lack combat experience. This time, it's a good opportunity to deal with North Korea. Next, they just need to wait for them to come up with a battle plan. After leaving the Navy headquarters, Yang Qindong went to the Chigang City Lord's mansion again to plan who to send to North Korea. In history, North Korea is like a willow tree, always used to fall with the wind. Yang Qindong naturally has no good impression of such a country, and this time, they dared to provoke him, so there's no need for them to exist. Arranging 200,000 Han people to enter North Korea is the task Yang Qindong gave to Yu Qian. Because of this matter, Yu Qian was both happy and in pain. In his eyes, this 6th young master was a bit too belligerent. And the direct result was that the Han commoners were increasingly lacking. As long as there were knowledgeable commoners who had a sense of nationality, they would always be sent to other places. Even now, some of the large factories in Crimson City were lacking in manpower. Because of this matter, the directors of those large factories had often come to find him to vent their anger, making quite a bit of trouble. She knew that Yu Qian was a hardworking person, so as long as you looked for him because of work, needless to say, he would never get angry. However, this made Yu Qian suffer. Yang Qindong was the one who gave the order to transfer people away. His subordinates did not dare to ask the 6th young master for an explanation, so they all came to him. How could he not be in pain? But on the contrary, every time Yang Xie sent out a few Han Chinese, it meant that Yang Xie's territory had expanded and the Han Chinese's influence had increased. Yang Xie's life in the future would be better. As a Han person with a strong sense of national pride, Yu Qian felt very happy about this. He was very optimistic about Yang Chendong's way of doing things. In his view, the Han people had the best history of civilization, the highest intelligence, and even the kindest heart. They were educated, courteous, and open-minded. They should be the rulers, and should not drag out an ignoble existence under the oppression of the foreign races. Yang Chendong was working hard to do this step. Since he had caught up with this good era, of course he should do his best to cooperate with him. Therefore, whenever there was a need for cadres, half of the city lord's mansion would be taken away. When another batch of cadres was finally formed, it would not take long for them to be taken away again. Even his own son was sent out. However, he was not angry at all. He was still in pain and happy at the same time. He was happy and happy at the same time. This time Yang Chendong came to ask for people again. Yu Qian gritted his teeth and decided to take away another 200,000 people. But considering that if this continued, the Han population would become smaller and smaller, and in the end, they would not be able to make ends meet. Thus he couldn't help but remind Duke Zhongdan of the Han people that were brought back with money. Other than the elderly and children, there are less than 2 million adult men and women left after several transfers. Moreover, most of them are illiterate. It is too difficult to train these people without any foundation. I'm afraid that it won't be so easy next time. Rest assured, City Lord. The south of the Great Ming Dynasty is currently at war, and I have already arranged for people to take in the Han commoners. At that time, there will be many homeless commoners who can no longer live, and will be transported to Crimson City. There will be a large number of them, and it will be enough to make up for the shortage. However, it will take a lot of effort to train them. After all, in the future, they will represent the Han people and go to various places to be masters. In terms of quality, they must be improved. I do not wish for their gluttony and laziness to lead to the dissatisfaction of the other races. If that is the case, no matter how many troops we have, it will not be enough. Yang Chendong replied with a smile. While he was exporting, he did not forget to import. He repeated this process over and over again. The commoners who entered Crimson City were ignorant and poor, while the commoners who left were knowledgeable and knowledgeable. Under their influence, the areas under their rule would definitely develop better and better, and the overall situation would also become better and better. Good, with the words of the Duke Zhongdan, this old man is relieved. Yu Qian smiled with satisfaction. He was very much in favor of Yang Chendong using the people to influence the people, using culture to influence the culture of the foreign race, and using habits to influence the culture of the foreign race. As long as this matter was done well, perhaps after 100 years, or even not so long, it would only take 2 or 3 generations. Everyone would be used to the Han people being the most powerful and noble race in the world. They would be used to learning Chinese and speaking the Han language. In the long run, it was possible for the world to become one. Yu Qian promised to give another 200,000 people who were already educated and had a certain level of skills. This was equivalent to having the cornerstone to enter North Korea. Next, Yang Chendong successively gave orders to Shirqing, Laos, Vietnam, Cambodia, Luzon, and other places. He asked them to prepare 30,000 to 100,000 people and prepare to move out. At the same time, they were also prepared to accept the same number of people who moved back. Yang Chendong wanted to use this method to make a big change. First, the density of the local population would be diluted, and the outsiders would gradually occupy the place. When the time was right, the local residents would have to leave the place where they grew up. In this way, these people would become rootless trees, and there would be no need to worry about what they would do. This was a long-term work, and it was also a big project. Only someone like Yang Chendong, who had a huge territory and enough financial resources, could do this. Yang Chendong, who had been busy for a day, returned to the palace. The first thing he did was to go to the second husband's bedroom to see his eldest daughter, Lele. Lele had been born for more than 10 days. Her eyes could already see the outside world clearly. Her big eyes were very cute. Whenever Yang Chendong held her in his arms, she would stick close to him tightly, and then carefully look at the man who was holding her. She was curious and very quiet. In the words of the first Madame Huyen, this was the feeling of blood. Little Lele knew that this was her father, the person closest to her in the world. So every time she was in her father's arms, she was very obedient and didn't make a fuss. These words made Yang Chendong, who was used to not showing his emotions on his face, so he was elated. Every time this happened, he would proudly say that he was a qualified father, a great father, and a father who cared deeply for his daughter. Yang Chendong liked little Lele so much that Xiao Yin, who was still in confinement, was very satisfied. Originally, she thought that giving birth to a daughter would cause the young master to be unhappy. Now it seemed that she had worried too much. In fact, it wasn't just Xiao Yin. The other madams also had the same idea. But with little Lele's pearl in front of them, everyone was a lot more relieved. Presumably, no matter if it was a boy or a girl, the husband would be very happy. But happy days always seem to be short. 3 days later, a set of very specific battle plans were sent to Yang Chendong by the 2nd Marine Army. Looking at the battle plans that were originally drawn up according to the Korean military's deployment, Yang Chendong waved his pen and approved. This also indicated that he didn't have much time left in Choken City. Next, he needed to return to the battlefield and let those who didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth know what the consequences of angering him for having ideas about the 5-star army were. At the end of the 8th month of the year 1454, more than 600 ships of various sizes, including 6 large warships, New Number 4, New Number 5, New Number 6, War God Number 4, Number 5 and Number 6, more than 100 medium-sized warships, several hundred small warships, and more than 100 transport ships. Under Yang Chendong's personal leadership, the 2nd Marine Army was mobilized. The 4th Marine Division, 5th Marine Division, and 6th Marine Division, totaling more than 20,000 people, left Choken City's naval port and headed straight for the Korean kingdom thousands of miles away. After years of continuous efforts by Choken City's shipyard, the warships had been converted from wind and human power to combustion power. The technology couldn't be said to be very mature, especially in terms of flexibility. There was still a lot of room for improvement. But in terms of speed, it was already very fast. Especially those small warships. Once they entered the sea, they were like fish. Whether it was forward or backward, whether there was wind or no waves, whether it was sunny or rainy, their speed was extremely fast. This time, these hundreds of small warships acted as scouts. They guarded the 2 sides of the large fleet and headed straight for the Korean kingdom. Along the way, whenever they encountered a ship that wasn't on their side, they would stop it if they could. If they couldn't, they would use cannons to sink it. In short, they were not allowed to spread the news. Since a long time ago, the 5-star army had taken control of the Ming Dynasty's East China Sea. Usually, the number of ships that could be seen here was very limited. This made it easy for them to clean up. Along the way, they sealed off all information. A few days later, they arrived at the Korean Strait and bumped into the first batch of Korean naval forces. Chapter 937. This time, the 2nd Marine Corps came prepared. They were light and did not bring too many supplies, allowing them to reach the fastest speed possible. As soon as they saw their target, they surrounded the enemy ship. Hundreds of small warships surrounded the enemy ship like ants. Lock onto the target. All ships will fire until they sink or surrender. The commander of the 2nd Marine Corps, Yu Guang, asked Yang Chendong in the command room before giving the first order. Yang Chendong, who was also in the command room, did not speak from beginning to end. He just watched everything that happened in front of him as an observer. Since Yu Guang was able to get Gao Xiong's recommendation to be the commander of the 2nd Marine Corps, he should be very capable. In front of people who had been in naval warfare for many years, Yang Chendong would not casually give orders and interrupt the other party's command plan. On the warships of the 2nd Marine Corps, there were fixed cannons. Except for the 6 main ships, the cannons on the other ships were not made in the large warehouse. They were directly made by the shipyard in Resin City. Their weakness was that their attack range was short, the power of the cannons was small, and the accuracy was poor. However, because they were cheap and the cannons were simple to make, there were enough of them. When the 500 warships, not including the transport ships, formed a circle and surrounded the North Korean Navy, and after the siege began, cannon fire filled the sky. One cannonball after another was fired from the warships. One after another, huge waves flashed in the area. If one was unlucky, a North Korean ship would be hit by a cannonball. In light cases, the ship would be tilted and unable to fight. In heavy cases, the ship would directly sink and the people on board would be fed to the fish. This kind of unequal battle only took a little more than an hour, and it was already over. Of the 50 North Korean ships, 12 were sunk, 18 were heavily damaged, and the remaining 20 or so were forced to hang the white flag and surrender. From the beginning to the end, not a single enemy ship escaped. After completing the first battle with a high-standard posture, the commander of the Sea Second Army, Yu Guang, asked for instructions from Yang Chendong to continue moving forward. While the other side was still unaware of the news of their arrival, they directly drove into the other side's military port and carried out a surprise attack. Agreed. Yang Chendong looked at the map and saw that the North Korean Navy's port was only 200 nautical miles away from them. He nodded and approved of the battle plan. General Yueguang immediately gave the order to leave a portion of the ships to clean up the mess, while the other ships headed towards the North Korean Navy port. The main force of the 3 divisions arrived in the evening. At this moment, the North Korean Navy was completely defenseless. The soldiers were eating dinner when the artillery shells fell from the sky. They didn't even need to use the 6 main cabins to open fire. Just the firepower of the other small and medium-sized warships was enough to turn this place into a sea of fire. Then they took advantage of the night to enter and seize the Navy port in the dark, establishing the victory of the second battle. Even in the middle of the night, the landing of the transport ships did not stop. In the past, who knew how many times they had chosen to train at night? Now it finally came in handy. C Division 4, C Division 5 and C Division SIXS Cold Vanguard warriors landed on land. Armed with 95 style Hwada and 7-star repeating crossbows, they charged straight for the heart of North Korea. On the 6th day of the 9th month, the 4th Division of the 2nd Sea Army, under the command of Ding Yen and the 1st World Cavalry Division, took the lead in attacking Pusan. In just 2 hours, they broke through the Korean army and reached Seoul in just half a month. The 5th Division of the 5th Sea Army, under the command of Hegong, and the 6th Sea Army, under the command of Guyong, followed. They fought all the way to Pyongyang and chased Li Yong, who had just survived the Gyujing disaster and finally seized the throne and became the King of Korea, to the Yalu River. The reason why it was so simple was not because I was lazy, but because I had no choice. Facing the strength of the Cold Vanguard Division, the entire battle could be summed up in one word: one-sided. All in all, the North Korean army kept running, and the 5-star army kept chasing. Even if the 5-star army didn't chase, the North Korean army would still run. They didn't defend Seoul, and they didn't defend Pyongyang. With the war going on like this, the morale of the North Korean army was already low. It was impossible to organize a counterattack. Li Illinois brought his important officials Zhang Linji and Han Ming to the Yalu River. His face was still filled with panic. From the start of the war, he received news of cities falling. At first, Li Illinois was really shocked. Ever since he sent Han Ming to intercept the 5-star army and sink 4 of their ships, he had been waiting for news of them coming to negotiate. Because of this, Li Illinois couldn't wait to show off his skills in front of the Beiming Emperor. He had even sent an official to the capital of Beiming to report good news to Emperor Daijong. The general idea was that they had succeeded in stopping the 5-star army. Now they just had to wait for the 5-star army to come. Then they could state their conditions. Actually, from anyone's point of view, this should be the result. Unless the 5-star army didn't want this route anymore, they would have to lower their heads. As for whether the 5-star army would fight head-on, Li Illinois didn't even think about it. This was his territory. Although North Korea was small, they had more than 300 ships. Once a war started, it wouldn't be so easy to end it. Once it became a protracted war, he had the port and docks to replenish his resources and manpower. Who would he be afraid of? However, he didn't expect the 5-star army to really attack. Not only that, but the North Korean Navy had defeated their navy so quickly, and there was no news at all. The powerful and invincible North Korean Navy in his heart had been completely wiped out. This was already something that Li Ji didn't dare to imagine. What was even more unexpected was that the North Korean army, which usually looked very capable, was so vulnerable in the face of the five-star army's attack. Each and every one of them was defending a strong city, but they couldn't even withstand a single round of attack. Their cities were broken one after another, and in the end, they even lost the country's capital. Thinking back to when he was on the watchtower of Seoul, he saw the horde of cavalry sweeping over like a storm. Then, his soldiers didn't even have the courage to fight back. Every time Lee Illinois thought about this, his body couldn't help but tremble. The five-star army was actually so powerful. Just their aura alone was enough to disperse the morale of his troops. What a powerful existence this was. Before this, he actually wanted to provoke them. He really didn't know what was good for him. Li Gui didn't know that he had made a huge mistake. He didn't know the true face of Mount Lu, and was only fated to be in this mountain. All along, the North Korean military was very weak. They didn't have any real combat experience, so they thought that they were the strongest army in the world. They were busy fighting each other every day, and the training and control of the military were completely based on the situation. The civil officials were busy fighting for power, while the military officials were busy earning money. No one cared about the life and death of the soldiers at the bottom. As a result, the military was already extremely weak. Using a set of data as an example, the North Korean army that reported to Lee, Illinois had a total of 150,000 soldiers. This was the so-called standing army. If there was a real war, they could still mobilize 200,000 soldiers from the civilian population. However, more than half of the 150,000 standing troops had been robbed of their pay and salaries. In other words, the generals reported 150,000 soldiers, but in reality, they only had around 60,000 to 70,000 soldiers. This was the total number of people from the Navy and the Army. No matter what, they had such a large territory and so few soldiers. They also didn't have much time to train. Furthermore, they were facing the powerful Lung Feng's army and the world's #1 cavalry division that even Lung Feng admired. Their defeat was already set in stone. After being chased out of his own country, Lee, Illinois was naturally very angry. Fortunately, he managed to escape and even came to Baiming's territory. Walking on this black land, he finally regained some of his confidence. How about this? This king will immediately write a letter to Baiming's emperor and ask him to send troops to take back everything for us. In Li Il's eyes, the great Ming dynasty was still omnipotent. Even if it was forced to split into the north and south for some reason, a starving camel was still bigger than a horse. Furthermore, the leader of the five-star army was the Duke of Loyalty personally conferred by the great Ming dynasty's emperor. Lee, Illinois didn't dare to offend his superior. With his only hope, Li Gui led his officials into the Gaizhou guard office in the Liao capital of northern Ming. At the same time, he wrote an extremely formal letter of credence, and had it sent to the capital of northern Ming by the fastest speed possible. Just as Lee, Illinois was waiting for Baiming's emperor to come out and make a decision for him, something unimaginable happened. It was something that he didn't even dare to think about before. Gai Prefecture, which was still the same yesterday, was actually surrounded by armored cavalry today. Naturally, it was the 1st Cavalry Division that Yang Qindong personally conferred. After experiencing the destruction of Kim Bien Dynasty, the destruction of Luzon, and the destruction of North Korea, their forces had suffered losses, and they had not had time to replenish. It seemed that there were only more than 5,000 people, but after a long period of killing, each of them exuded a bloodthirsty aura. Even if they were riding on horses, they would give people a feeling that they were the emissaries of hell. It would make people involuntarily afraid and shudder involuntarily. They suddenly appeared and surrounded the Gai Prefecture guard office. They were ordered by the Heavenly Khan to catch the culprit. Whether it was General Han Mingjin, who commanded the Battle of the Korean Strait, or the new king of North Korea, Lee, Illinois, who was the instigator behind the battle, they were not caught and brought to justice. This made the Navy soldiers hold their breath. Now it seemed that they had to vent their anger after the great victory. Therefore, Yang Qindong gave the order to catch the main culprit. Even if Lee, Illinois and the others hid in the Baiming guard office, they still couldn't escape the fate of being surrounded. Chapter 938. This was also the first time that the five-star army had taken the initiative to attack Beiming. Although there had been large and small battles before, they had been forced into a corner. Unlike this time, they came openly and acted as if they were going to attack the city if they didn't hand over the captives. The general of the Gai province guard was called Lu Song. He was only a Qianhu. The entire city only had 1,000 soldiers and 20,000 civilians. No matter what kind of personality he had, when faced with such a strong army, there was nothing he could do. In the face of this situation, the only thing he could do was to continuously send people to ask for help. He sent people to ask for help from the nearby Jian province guard and other guards. He also sent people to ask for help from Beiming's capital. At the same time, he didn't forget to send people to negotiate with the five-star army's cavalry, asking them to give them a few more days. They would think of a way to convince King Li Yong and the others to surrender. Fortunately, Tian Hu had received strict orders from Yang Qindong. Unless the Beiming army took the initiative to attack, it was better to settle the matter peacefully. Now wasn't the time to fall out with Beiming. It was because of this order that Tian Hu made an exception and didn't immediately make a move. Instead, he gave Lu Song 5 days. If the other side didn't respond by the time was up, then they could only break into the city. When the news reached Gai Province City, Li Yong's face was naturally filled with fear. He immediately brought 2 important officials to find General Lu Song and asked him to send people to escort him to Beiming's capital. He also said that he was a guest of the Emperor of Beiming. With regards to this request, Lu Song naturally rejected it without even thinking about it. Not to mention that anyone who left the city would have to risk being surrounded and killed by the cavalry of the 1st Cavalry Division. The matter had already been reported. Without the Emperor's order, he definitely wouldn't let anyone go. Seeing that this plan was not working, Zheng Linji, who was traveling with them, made another request. That was to defend Gaizhou City to the death. The other party was all cavalry. They were good at chasing people and were good at charging. But when it came to sieging a city, they were not good at it. Faced with this suggestion, General Lu Song still shook his head. Once the battle starts, the city will definitely fall. As for the reason, you can go up the city gate tower and take a look. The enemy's infantry has already rushed over. Yes, it had only been a day since the 1st Division of Heavenly Cavalry arrived at Gaizhou City on their bicycles. They had firearms in their hands, and each soldier carried 5 grenades with them. Once they gathered them together, what kind of city gate could not be blown open? This wouldn't do, that wouldn't do. Li Gui sadly realized that he was like a piece of fat meat on a chopping board, waiting to be slaughtered. At this moment, his heart was filled with countless regrets. If he had known that the five-star army was so powerful that even Beiming was so apprehensive, why would he have provoked them for no reason? Now, in order to show his loyalty to Beiming, he had sacrificed himself. Not only did the whole of North Korea fall into the hands of the enemy, but it also seemed that they would have to give up their lives sooner or later. What was the purpose of this? At this moment, it was obviously unrealistic to go out of the city and surrender. After all, they had sunk 4 of the five-star army's transport ships. Would they let it go so easily? Since he could not surrender, he could only place his hopes on the Northern Ming Emperor. He hoped that the Northern Ming Emperor would give him a hand on account of the fact that he had put in a lot of effort and was unlucky. While waiting, on the 3rd day of the siege, the soldiers from Beiming's guard post arrived one after another. On the 4th day, the number of Beiming soldiers outside Gaizhou City had reached more than 10,000. In terms of numbers, they had already surpassed the five-star army. But even so, both sides were very restrained and did not have any intention of attacking. Whether it was the 1st Regiment or the 2nd Regiment of the 4th Regiment, of course they would not bother to attack. Since they said that they would give the enemy 5 days, they would not take the initiative to attack before the 5 days were up. The soldiers from Beiming's guard post were completely different. Although it seemed that they had the advantage in numbers, they did not dare to underestimate the enemy in front of them. Although they had not fought yet, they had a feeling that if they did, they would be the ones to lose. Because of this, many of the Beiming generals who came to reinforce Gaizhou City thought that it would be best if the emperor did not protect these defeated North Korean soldiers. They did not want to bring disaster to themselves because of a moment of righteousness. The result also proved that their emperor was wise and did not use righteousness. On the 5th night of the siege of Gaizhou City, the emperor's decree finally arrived. The general idea was that North Korea had provoked the Five-Star Army. Now they were just seeking revenge. The people still said that a debt must be paid and a life must be paid for. As the emperor, it was not good for him to interfere. In short, Daizong did not care about anything related to North Korea. Speaking of which, this result was not unexpected. The North Korean Navy had taken the initiative to ambush the Five-Star Army's transport ship, which caused them to be angered. In a short period of time, they had taken the initiative to destroy a country. What kind of military strength did they display? At this moment, why would Baiming stand out and make an enemy out of the Five-Star Army? No matter what, Yang Chendong was still the great Ming dynasty's loyal duke. On the surface, they were still one family. Moreover, the facts had already proven that the other party had no intention of attacking them. Since that was the case, why did they have to interfere and make things difficult for themselves? What Baiming wanted to do now was not to go head-to-head with the Five-Star Army. Instead, they wanted to defeat Yeshen and Walla to prove their strength. Then they would go down south to defeat the South Ming dynasty and unify the Great Ming dynasty. At that time, they would have a chance to repeat the Great Ming dynasty's glory. At that time, it would be time to consider getting rid of the Five-Star Army. At this moment, they could not complicate matters. This was not only Zhu Qiyu's idea, it was also the idea of the court's civil and military officials. However, these officials also made a request. That was, they could not casually hand over the people, and North Korea could not be casually given away. After all, North Korea was a vassal state appointed by the Great Ming dynasty's Emperor Taizu. It was not right for them to be taken advantage of like this. Therefore, if the Five-Star Army insisted on occupying this place, could they consider giving them some war horses? This way, they would have some face, and Baiming would also have an explanation to the people of the world. Naturally, there were already messengers regarding this request that had already passed through Gaizhou City and went straight to the capital of North Korea. This kind of private transaction would definitely not be explained to Li Meng and the others. No matter what, this was a disgraceful matter. With the emperor's decree, General Lu Song breathed a sigh of relief. The Baiming reinforcements that came from outside the city also breathed a sigh of relief. Then Li Meng and the others were dragged out of their beds by the Baiming army in the middle of the night and sent out of the city to the Five-Star Army. With the goal achieved and the people in his hands, Tian Hu waved his hand, and the Five-Star Army withdrew overnight. The conflict at the border thus ended and peace returned. However, the impact of this matter did not disappear. The Five-Star Army that came to Baiming's territory was as free as their own backyard. This more or less gave the Baiming generals a lot of pressure and warnings. It even had a big impact on the morale of the army. This caused a natural imbalance between the two sides when they met in the future. Of course, this was a matter for later. Li Meng, Zheng Linji, Han Mingjin, and the others were brought back to Seoul. Then, in the largest square in Seoul, they were beheaded in public. This scene was seen by many North Koreans, but most of them were angry but did not dare to say anything. Some people did not even have the courage to be angry. Just like when he occupied other small countries, Yang Chendong adopted the same policy here. Voluntarily surrendering and cooperating with the Five-Star Army could keep one's life safe, and only half of one's property could be handed over. If there were any resistance, they would be killed or sentenced to a few dozen years of labor. Because it was the North Korean Navy that provoked the Five-Star Army first, these few rules were enforced very strictly. Often, if there were any resistance, they would not be judged according to their crimes. They would be beheaded as a warning to everyone. Because of this, in just a few days, thousands of heads fell to the ground in the capital of Seoul. Many officials' families were also exterminated. Not a single person was left alive. Under the oppressive policy of the Five-Star Army, the other officials and influential people were in a state of panic. They did not know if the next misfortune would fall on their heads. Yang Chendong had thought about this oppressive policy many times before making the decision. He was not a bloodthirsty person. What he did was to fulfill the great dream in his heart. Every time he saw the faint 5 stars on his arm, he became more determined in his dream. Although he did not want to kill, he had no choice but to do so. This time, the North Korean Navy provoked the 5-star army. If they were not punished, wouldn't the other factions follow suit next time? Thus, this time he had to be ruthless. It could be considered a serious warning to everyone. In addition, he had already made all sorts of preparations. He had already moved the people from other regions to North Korea, and all the people who were not friendly to the 5-star army were all moved out. With such a big change of blood, the North Korean people would be torn apart in the future. In the end, it would be difficult for them to achieve anything. Even if things were a little extreme, there was no need to worry too much. Thus, under this oppressive attitude, many people would die in North Korea every day. More people wanted to live, so their attitude changed. From the initial soft resistance to the current full cooperation and cooperation. Lee Min-ho was one of the most typical officials. He was originally a subordinate of the North Korean king Lee Hong-gu. However, he did not expect Lee Gu to take care of his master and become king. Because of this, he lost the power in his hands. He was forced to stand on the side, and would not have a chance to rise again in this life. However, no one would have thought that Lee Gu would face such a disaster right after he ascended the throne. Now that Lee Gu and his officials were all killed, officials like Lee Min-ho had a chance to come out again. Chapter 939. Lee Min-ho was originally a person with a flexible mind. While others were worried about whether their heads would still be hanging on their necks tomorrow, Lee Min-ho was thinking more about how to use this opportunity to establish a relationship with the 5-star army, and then become an important minister of North Korea after the reform. In fact, he had such a condition. Before the 5-star army attacked North Korea, because he had a high position in the army, he was the director of the 5-star army's security bureau in North Korea. Yukon took the initiative to contact him, and he sold some information to him. It could be said that they had some economic dealings. But later, the smart Lee Min-ho found out that some of Yukon's interests had nothing to do with being a businessman. The other party kept saying that he wanted to do business, so he wanted to know the layout of the North Korean military. But if he was doing business, why would he have such worries? Although Yukon was involved in an underground business, Lee Min-ho felt that Yukon lacked the unscrupulous aura of a businessman. Therefore, he spent a lot of effort to investigate Yukon. Although he didn't find any evidence, he could see that this person's identity was suspicious from many aspects. Logically speaking, if Lee Min-ho wanted to arrest someone in North Korea, he didn't even need a reason. But for Yukon, not only did he not do that, he even stopped all the investigation, as if nothing had happened. The two of them continued their relationship, and if possible, he even took the initiative to provide some convenient conditions for the other party. What kind of person was Yukon? When he faced the shrewd Shan in Tala City, he didn't even frown. He was very cautious, and there were many well-trained intelligence elites under him. Lee Min-ho sent people to investigate him, and soon found out. And then he was ready to kill him to silence him. But then he found that this person was very tactful. Seeing that Hai Erjuan's attack was imminent, in order to avoid unnecessary trouble, he stopped killing him and let him escape. After conquering the entire North Korea, the situation was in chaos. At this moment, Yukon thought of Lee Min-ho again. This time, he publicly looked for Lee Min-ho and revealed his identity. He hoped that Lee Min-ho could cooperate with his work to clear the assets of the officials and aristocratic families in Seoul. Although the Intelligence Bureau also had some information, without the help of a local snake, a lot of work would inevitably take some detours. Yukon turned out to be a member of the 5-star army, and an important member. This made Lee Min-ho, who had a headache over the current situation, and didn't even know what to do next, overjoyed. He immediately took the initiative to accept this task. Under his leadership, many hidden rich families in Seoul were uncovered, and helped the mercenaries collect 2 million taels of silver. It could be said that he had made a lot of contributions. It must be said that Lee Min-ho was really good at doing things. After doing so many good deeds in a row, he didn't have the intention to ask for a reward. He still behaved properly, And even according to the rules of the five-star army, he took the initiative to hand over half of his family's assets. Not only that, Lee Min-heo knew that if he wanted to gain a foothold in the new government, relying on this alone was not enough. He also needed to have his own people in the five-star palace, preferably his own family. Then who was his own family? Of course, his family was the best. Fortunately, Lee Min-heo was also a talented man when he was young. Because of his background, his wife was also very beautiful. More importantly, he gave birth to a daughter who was as beautiful as a fairy. How to take the opportunity to give himself 7 good sons-in-law to strengthen the Lee family in the future became a problem that he needed to consider. In order to catch a rich husband, Lee Min-heo first sent his daughter to the dance school opened by the five-star army to learn how to dance. Then he hired a few Chinese teachers at a high price to make the best use of the time to tutor his daughter. He also found some people who were familiar with Han etiquette to be teachers of etiquette. After that, he began to wait for the opportunity to come. After successfully conquering the entire territory of North Korea and killing the new king, Li Ji, they established a new supply route. In the future, the supplies did not need to enter the sea town. They could directly go ashore at the port of North Korea, and then enter Liaodong through the Yalu River and then enter Shecheng. Under the great success, Luan Xiaoyu, who came with the transport ship, proposed to hold a social ball. It could not only help the brothers who fought on the battlefield to relax and create some opportunities for their marriage, it could also ease the tense atmosphere in Seoul, and at the same time, it could also improve the relationship with some of the representatives of the local forces. Yang Chendong knew very well that for every land that was conquered, whether they could stand firm or not did not depend on the degree of recognition of the people at the beginning, but whether these influential people cooperated or not. In addition, this was Luan Xiaoyu's request. After thinking about it, he agreed and completely handed over the preparation work of the banquet. Luan Xiaoyu, who received the agreement, was of course very happy. She immediately opened a temporary dance school to teach some of the North Korean officials women dance. Then, she took out the equipment that had been prepared long ago and prepared to organize a decent ball. When the news spread, Lee Min-heo knew that the opportunity that he had been waiting for had appeared. If he could take this opportunity to find a good husband for his daughter, it would be equivalent to finding a good backer for the Lee family. At that time, who would dare to bully them? Therefore, he spent a lot of effort to dress up his daughter well. Lee Zhenju was Lee Min-heo's daughter. She was indeed very beautiful. She had the quiet beauty that was unique to the Korean people. She was 1.66 meters tall, and her gorgeous clothes made her figure even more perfect. In addition, she had learned the so-called social dance very well and danced very well. This time, she was confident that she would shine in the ball and achieve the most dazzling goal. In fact, it wasn't just Lee Min-heo who was doing this. Many Korean families and clans were also making similar preparations. They found the most beautiful young girls in their clans and prepared to use them as marriage bonds. At the same time, some of the young masters of these clans were also making preparations. They wanted to see if there was any opportunity to get in touch with some high-ranking officers of the five-star army. If they could form a friendship, it would be beneficial for the future development of their clans. But in such a clan there was also an outlier. His name was Han Chong. He was a young master in his early 20s who looked quite handsome. For a long time, Han Chong was a hot topic among the younger generation. Not only did this person have a good appearance, but most importantly, he was well-read and also had good skills. How to say it? A person who was well-versed in both literature and martial arts described this kind of person. His family background was good. He was related to Han Mingjin, who had been sentenced to death. He was also a capable person. Under the influence of the great Ming Dynasty's Confucianism, he knew all the 4 books and 5 classics. It could be said that he was very talented. In addition, he had learned martial arts. His body was strong and he looked good. It was impossible for him to keep a low profile. If it weren't for the Korean Navy provoking the five-star army, people like Han Chong would have stood out sooner or later. It was inevitable that he would become a pillar of the Korean kingdom in the future. Such a young master naturally attracted the attention of a group of young girls. Once upon a time, he and Lee Zhenju were said to be a pair. A talented man and a beautiful woman were so harmonious. Some people even said that they were a match made in heaven. But now everything was over. Since the defeat of the Korean army, there had been no contact between the two. But the story of the two who were lucky to survive was not over. At least Han Chang thought so. He really liked Lee Zhenju and wanted to marry this person. For this matter, he had recently visited the Lee family several times, but unfortunately he was stopped for various reasons. Compared to Lee Minheo, who couldn't help but smile when he saw Han Chang before, he actually closed his eyes and refused to see Han Chang. This already explained the problem. At least, he would not agree to his daughter's relationship with Han Chang, which made him very depressed. Han Chang didn't want to fail. He wanted to continue to look for opportunities, and this ball was his opportunity. For his marriage happiness, he had a bold idea. That was to show his love in public at the ball. In this way, perhaps someone would stand up and take advantage of her beauty. He could achieve his wish and hold the beauty. With Han Chang's background, his family got 3 tickets to the ball. With his outstanding performance, his father, Han Zhao, who was also the head of the family, decided to take him to the ball. It was just that before he went, he had told him to be honest in the ball venue. He heard that even the Duke of Loyalty would participate. He should not make trouble. Otherwise, if he provoked the anger of others, not only would he hurt himself, but he was afraid that even the entire Han family would not get any benefits. Han Chang naturally agreed to his father's words. But God knew that his heart had already flown to the ball. To Lee Zhenju, whom he hadn't seen for a long time. The location of the ball was decided by Luan Xiaoyu. She chose the largest Tianyang Hall in the North Korean palace, except for the main hall. She first ordered people to move away some of the useless things, creating a large central area. Then she ordered people to prepare wine and other things. She wanted to make the environment of this banquet into a buffet. Back in Crimson City, Yang Chendong had done it once in the palace. That time, he had invited some important members of the city. After Luan Xiaoyu participated, she felt that it was quite good. In the banquet, people could find people they were interested in to chat with. They could improve their friendship through chatting. At the same time, it showed the luxurious and colorful side of life. It could be said that young people were very yearning for it. Holding the banquet here could let the North Koreans see their strength. It could also play a big role in the unification of 10,000 hearts. Chapter 940. Luan Xiaoyu was the future 6th madam, and she was the type that was set in stone. At the same time, she was the boss of the entire publicity department, and she was also the top sister of the 5-person investigation team in Crimson City. If she decided to do something, who would dare to stop her? Everything was carried out according to her instructions. Yang Chendong already had some understanding of this matter, but he did not say anything about it. Since Xiaoyu liked it, he would let her do as she pleased. If this ball could let the North Koreans see the power and prosperity of the Yang family, and make them yearn for it, it would be a great thing. Of course, what he cared about was the family of the officers. According to the rules of the 5-star army, an officer could apply for marriage as long as 2 of the 3 conditions were met. First, they had to have joined the 5-star army for more than 2 years. Second, their position had to be at least a battalion commander. Third, their military rank had to be at least a major. As long as 2 of the 3 conditions were met, they could start a family. They could even take in concubines. Of course, for the mid-level officers of the 5-star army, their first wife had to be a Han. This was not an exception. However, if they really liked a woman, they could take in a concubine if she was not a Han. This was also a way to increase their Han genes. In the future, the Han men would become more handsome, and the women would become more beautiful. Joining the 5-star army, which was the earliest mercenary group, was a busy start. Other than fighting everywhere, the internal competition was also very fierce. If you did not move forward, you might be surpassed by others and then replaced. No one wanted their hard work to be wasted, so they could only work harder. Over time, some officers did not have the chance to solve their personal problems. Perhaps the ball was a good way. Not only did they have to let the horse run, but they also had to let the horse eat good grass and feed it fine fodder. This was Yang Chendong's standard of doing things. Although the competition for all levels of officers in Yang Xie's forces was very fierce, and there were many things to do every day, but correspondingly, they also received a lot in return. In the past, they were treated well in terms of money and treatment. Now the way of the ball was a kind of care and concern in life. North Korea's new provincial governor was already in place. His name was Zhang Yi, and he had once worked in Chisun City's City Lord Manor. Reality had already proven his ability, and this time, he had transferred one of City Lord Yu Qian's trusted subordinates to be in charge of North Korea. Under Yang Chendong's instructions, Zhang Yi participated in the preparation work of the ball. He invited who he invited and what he had to say to the people he invited. This was a great help for Zhang Yi to understand the situation here faster. In the end, under Zhang Yi's ample preparation, other than the officers of the 5-star army, a total of more than 100 local clans were invited to the ball. In total, the number of participants exceeded 300. Fortunately, the Heavenly Sun Hall occupied a large enough area. Otherwise, with a total of 600 to 700 people, the ball wouldn't be able to satisfy them. After many days of preparation, the day finally arrived. The time of the ball was set for the evening of the same day. After dinner, many well-dressed young ladies went out of the door in a carriage under the leadership of the patriarch, and went straight in the direction of the palace. The sky was already dark, and in the darkness, 2 shadows silently watched all of this from not far from the main entrance of the palace. But soon they were disappointed. The inspection here was very strict. Not only did they have to check the application, but also some officials who were very familiar with Seoul were here to screen the identity of the people who came here to prevent any unruly people from sneaking in. Thinking about it, since even Yang Chendong was going to participate, this ball, which was still fresh to people, must be of extremely high quality. It was reasonable for the security to be stricter. The inspection was very serious. The people who entered were also searched, but even so, the people who could enter actively cooperated. It can be seen that their hearts were already leaning towards the 5-star army. Big brother, it seems that we have no chance to sneak in. One of the 2 shadows in the darkness said. That's right. But second brother, we don't have to be discouraged. As long as we work hard, there will always be opportunities. A ball like this will definitely not satisfy everyone. Once someone is treated unfairly and has anger in his heart, it will be an opportunity for us to take advantage of. You have to know, since King Nanming sent us brothers here, it means that he has high hopes for us. We must not let the king down. In the darkness, another man made his own voice. From the sound of his voice, it was very calm, showing that he had a good psychological quality. The big brother's name was Guo Xinqing, and the second brother's name was Li Qingsong. They were sent by the former King Minzhuang, the current King Nanming, Zhu Huijin. After the 5-star army launched an attack on the Kimbian dynasty, Zhu Huijin also took the opportunity to declare himself as King Nanming. He first sent troops to deal with King Shiping in Yunnan. He wanted to expand his own efforts and clean up the enemies behind him. When King Nanming made his move, Zhu Qizhen of the southern Ming dynasty quickly made his move. He sent out 200,000 troops and launched a pincer attack with King Shiping. In the beginning it was fine. King Nanming, who had a certain amount of preparation, was able to withstand it. He even won some local battles. However, as time went by, King Nanming's various disadvantages became obvious. For example, the time he spent building his forces was still too short. His foundation was not enough, his financial resources were not enough, and his reserve army was not enough. In addition, he was originally a rebel and did not have the support of the people. After dozens of battles, he began to feel the strain. If the war continued like this, without the influence of external forces, he was afraid that the person who would lose in the end would be him. In order to protect himself and to change the situation, King Nanming began to think. In the end, he set his sights on Yang Chendong. There were already a few groups of Han people coming out of Chichen City. They could not be a monolithic block. From their mouths, some of the things about Chichen City had been learned by too many people. They also knew that the real leader of the 5-star army was Yang Chendong, who was known as the sixth young master of the Yang family. This was something that no one expected. After all, it had always been a mystery how this person had developed. However, this was the truth. There was no room for other people to doubt it. As the five-star army went to war again and again, their forces and territory continued to expand. He had become a person that everyone had to pay attention to. If the five-star army's strength was not too strong, they would have become the target of public criticism. King Nanming was also afraid of the five-star army's strength, and did not dare to have any ideas about this army. However, that did not mean that he did not dare to have any ideas about Yang Qindong. In his opinion, if an accident happened to this person, the entire world would fall into chaos again. In that case, he would be able to take advantage of the situation. In order to achieve this goal, Guo Xinqing and Li Qingsong, two powerful people, were sent to North Korea. Their mission was to find an opportunity to assassinate Yang Qindong. It would be best if they could kill him. If they could not, they would stir up chaos and anger the loyal duke. Then, they would put the seed of hatred on Nanming. The reason why King Nanming was so confident was because Guo Xinqing and Li Qingsong had another public identity. They were small leaders of the Nanming Imperial Guards. He had spent a lot of effort and a lot of money to buy them over. In other words, even if their identities were exposed, Yang Qindong would only hate Zhu Qizhen. It would have nothing to do with them. If they could really provoke the five-star army, the pressure on them would be greatly reduced. It would be a great opportunity for them to expand their territory and influence. Guo Xinqing and Li Qingsong thus came to North Korea through a secret channel. However, they were disappointed that they could not get close to their target. Since the assassination attempt at the Yongding sect in Baiming's capital, Yang Qindong's security had been strengthened. Usually when he went out, he was surrounded by people. There were even several carriages when he went out, making it difficult for people to distinguish which carriage he was in. When they couldn't find an opportunity, they accidentally heard about the ball. The two brothers wanted to come out and try their luck. Unfortunately, when they saw the inspection at the entrance of the palace, they knew that there was no chance for them to sneak into the palace. They could only wait. In the palace, more and more guests arrived. After going through many strict inspections, they entered the palace and came to the Tianyang Hall. This place was already brightly lit. As soon as they entered the hall, the melodious sound entered their ears. It was a very lively light music. The sound system was also good. There were also various kinds of lights in the hall. Naturally, they were all from a large warehouse. In Qian City, Yang Qindong took out a few sets, and one of them was brought to North Korea by Luan Xiaoyu. The generator was running at high speed to ensure the smooth flow of electricity. In the territory occupied by Yang Xie, a large amount of crude oil had been found. After purification, gasoline, diesel, and other things were no longer scarce. There was no problem in supplying electricity for a while. When those lights were lit up, it was as bright as day. It really gave the North Korean officials, who saw all this for the first time, a strong visual impact. These North Korean officials, who were usually high and mighty, had to lower their heads when looking at people. At this moment, were like Granny Lu entering the Grand View Garden. They looked left and right with a face full of curiosity, surprise, shock, and envy. The young people who came with their parents were shocked by everything in front of them to the extent that they couldn't breathe, and didn't know what to say. How could their spicy pickles compare to the dazzling array of delicacies on the menu? How could their kerosene lamps and high-grade candlesticks compare to the bright lights? Chapter 941. On both sides of the hall, there were crystal-clear glass cups covered with a layer of high-grade white cloth. They were probably expensive, right? There were also drinks of various colors in the cups, which were beyond their knowledge. Even some self-proclaimed scholars didn't know what to call them at this moment. There was also the rhythmic light music. Although it was their first time hearing it, everyone had the same appreciation for beauty. What made people hesitate was that they only heard the music but didn't see the appearance of the band. What the hell was this? It seemed that everyone who entered would first have a face of doubt, then shock, and finally numbness. There were even many people who had a very cautious expression on their faces. No wonder the five-star army was so powerful and could occupy the entire North Korea in such a short period of time. They had too many unknown things in their hands. With these, no country could compete with them. Even the great Ming Dynasty, which had always been high and mighty in their eyes, was far inferior to them. In the Heavenly Sun Hall, there were waitresses in white novelty shirts walking back and forth. They all had good figures and good appearances. They were the service staff of this ball, and several of them were agents of the CIA. Sometimes, their eyes would casually sweep across the hall, but in fact, they were screening all kinds of people. In a while, the sixth young master would arrive. This was the god in their hearts. The god's safety must not be the slightest mistake. Otherwise, their immediate superior, the fifth madam, would impose additional punishment on them. It would be a punishment for them to regret being born into this world. After most of the people attending the ball had arrived, a group of soldiers wearing military uniforms walked in. They were all tall and had boundless killing intent on their bodies, causing many of the young masters and young ladies to show fear on their faces. After these soldiers appeared, they once again carefully checked the big and small corners of the entire Heavenly Sun Hall. After confirming that there was no danger, they hid in the darkness. When everyone saw this scene, they knew that the great Ming Dynasty's Duke of Loyalty was about to appear. Sure enough, less than 10 minutes later, Yang Chendong appeared. As if to match the atmosphere of the cocktail party, he did not wear a green robe. Instead, he changed into a pure white Chinese tunic suit, which set off his valiant figure, made him look handsome and tall. Following Yang Chendong was Luan Xiaoyu, who was wearing a red evening dress. This red dress, which was tailor-made for her, made her look even more beautiful. Luan Xiaoyu's skin with light makeup also looked much fairer in the red dress. Coupled with the design of the dress, it made her figure look even more graceful. As soon as she appeared, she attracted the attention of many men. In contrast, those North Korean girls who seemed to be carefully dressed were dwarfed. This couldn't be helped. They didn't have the best advisor like Yang Chendong. They were conservative and didn't know how to show their advantages. How could they be compared? When Yang Chendong and Luan Xiaoyu, this golden couple, appeared, it immediately attracted a burst of applause. Then Yang Chendong took a wine glass from the hands of a waitress who was wandering around the venue. He raised the glass of red wine and nodded to the people who attended the banquet. At this moment, Yang Chendong seemed to have returned to the moment when he participated in the banquet and completed the mission in his previous life. The only difference was that he didn't have a dangerous assassination mission to do. The difference was that the clothes of the people who attended the banquet were different, but in the end, it seemed to be inharmonious with the atmosphere of the banquet. Naturally, this feeling was only shared by Yang Chendong. He had seen too many so-called successful people wearing suits and bow ties. He had also seen too many women who should be revealing, and even women who were revealing for the sake of revealing. After seeing the tightly wrapped officers and North Korean men and women, he couldn't help but feel a sense of inharmony. Yang Chendong raised his glass. The officers and North Korean officials were shocked and quickly found their glasses and raised their hands. In the process, because some people walked too fast, they almost fell to the ground, which also caused bursts of laughter. However, Yang Chendong didn't care about this. Instead, he smiled at those who almost made a fool of themselves. The meaning of encouragement was very obvious. Who knew how much loyalty he had gained from just this gaze alone? Everyone raised their glasses. Yang Chendong gently raised his left hand. The music stopped, and the audience became quiet. At this moment, his deep baritone voice sounded. Everyone, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to attend this banquet. You're too polite. What are you talking about? It's our honor to be able to attend this banquet. That's right, that's right. This is the face that you've given us. We can't thank you enough. All kinds of voices came from below. Without exception, all of them came to express their goodwill. It seemed that if they didn't say something, they couldn't express their excitement at this moment. In this regard, Yang Chendong smiled and nodded gently. After that, he continued to say, everyone, the former North Korean kingdom no longer exists. It has been replaced by the North Korean province. Next, Zhang Yi will be the first governor of the North Korean province. Zhang Yi is a person with outstanding ability. I believe that with his leadership, North Korea will soon become powerful and rich. Clatter, clatter, clatter. Amidst another round of applause, Zhang Yi walked out from the crowd and nodded to thank the crowd. Zhang Yi is indeed a good leader. I asked him to come here and work. I asked him if he had any requests. The first thing he said was that food is the most important thing for the people. He asked to reduce the price of food and solve the problem of the 2 million people in North Korea first. Since he's here to preside over the overall situation, I have to support him. There's no need to say anything. Sell the food at 20% of the pre-war price. I believe that there won't be a problem for the people to eat. Yang Chendong said with a smile, but these words shocked the North Korean officials who attended the banquet. North Korea was originally an agricultural country. Although it was close to the sea, most people still made a living by farming. Therefore, the price of food had always been very low. It was only because of the recent war that North Korea changed. The people were afraid that something would happen, so they began to stockpile food to ensure their safety. But now, Yang Chendong not only stabilized the price of food, but also sold it at 20% of the pre-war price. How low would the price be? It was almost the same as the country's harvest price. It was not an exaggeration to say that the situation in North Korea would quickly stabilize once this policy was implemented. After all, the problem of food and clothing was solved, which was equivalent to solving the most unstable factor. Everything would be much easier to do next. This decision was made because of Yangtze's development in the past few years. Qiqian City had always believed in walking on many legs. While developing industry and commerce, they did not fall behind in agriculture. For example, in Vietnam, Laos, and most of Ryukyu Island, all the land that could be developed was planted with food. In the spirit of paying taxes according to the proportion of the harvest of the land, this greatly increased the enthusiasm of the farmers. The income was directly linked to the output, and it was no longer a fixed land tax. Whoever planted more food would get more. They were no longer farming for the country, but for themselves. The enthusiasm of the people was unprecedentedly high, and a large number of wastelands were reclaimed. In addition, any farmer could apply for a loan from the local government to borrow cattle and farming tools. In the past 2 to 3 years, the weather was good, and the farmers had gained a lot of land. The granaries of several provinces had also been enriched. Now was the time to show the results. It was not difficult to transfer a part of the food from there to North Korea, but the benefits to the people were real. There was a saying among the people, if there is food at home, there is no need to panic. As long as the basic livelihood of the people was guaranteed, the people's hearts would be stable, and they would not be easily defeated by some things. The establishment of the North Korean provincial government would be more stable, and it would be much easier to implement other measures. Once Yang Bao succeeded in gaining a foothold and enjoyed enough influence among the people, the law would be more deeply rooted in the people's hearts. The people would not be bullied and their hearts would be stable. It would not be long before North Korea could exert its power and emit its unique spring. The reforms in Ryukyu Island, Laos, and Vietnam had proved everything. As long as they followed their pace, it was only a matter of time before they became strong. This was the bright path that Yang Chendong pointed out for the development of the place, a path of success that had been verified by later generations with facts. After the public announcement of the food problem today, the situation in North Korea would soon be stable again. This was already a visible fact. Yang Chendong had a confident smile at the corner of his mouth. Under his influence, the mood of the people attending the ball became more cheerful. Well, with the development of the previous dynasty's Xian province, Governor Zhang Yi will lead the provincial government to work hard with all of you. Then let's toast to a better tomorrow. Yang Chendong raised his glass, and all the people in uniform at the ball raised their goblets high. They had to give face to the sixth young master. Next were the local representatives of North Korea. One by one, they raised their glasses with joy. Yang Chendong drank all the red wine in one gulp, then said with a smile, "Well, it's time to dance. Let's dance." After saying that, he first made a gesture of invitation to his dance partner, Luan Xiaoyu, in a very gentlemanly manner. Luan Xiaoyu's cheeks were slightly red, and there was an intoxicating smile in her eyes. She gently put her palm on Yang Chendong's hand, and then the music started. The two of them danced gracefully, like two butterflies walking into the field. When the ball began, a group of officers also walked into the field. They had received a short period of special information before, so they knew a little about ballroom dancing. Now was the time for them to perform and see the results. Chapter 942. Of course, there were those who didn't. Among the officers, there were those who liked dancing, and there were also those who didn't. But no matter what, this was the sixth madam's idea, and the sixth young master agreed to it. Just based on this point alone, no one would refuse to give face. Regardless of whether they liked it or not, they could only brace themselves and support it. For example, one of the high-ranking officers, Tian Hu, was someone who didn't really like dancing. As the commander of the 1st Cavalry Division, Tian Hu had been in the limelight recently. He and his division's combat strength was admired by even the most arrogant Lung Feng. He was one of the few officers in the mixed army who could be treated with respect. However, not many people thought about how much effort the 1st Cavalry Division had put in to achieve their current results. When others were resting, they didn't rest. When others were resting, they didn't choose to rest. When others were resting after a big battle, they still continued to train like a raging fire. It was as if they were born to fight. It was because of his hard work and dedication that they were able to achieve results that only firearms could achieve with cold weapons. Recently, the situation in North Korea had become more and more stable. Many of the armies had entered a period of rest. Even Lung Feng's training only lasted for 4 hours in the morning, 4 hours in the afternoon, and 10 kilometers in the evening. However, only the 1st Cavalry Division continued to train on horseback. They practiced chopping and chopping on horseback. They used wooden swords in the practice, but even so, it was very easy for them to be lightly injured if they were chopped on a high-speed horse. Because of this, at least 10% of the cavalry was injured and didn't have the chance to return. This kind of training was a very self-consuming training method. The abnormal decrease in the number of soldiers had caused the 3 regimental commanders under him to complain incessantly. There were even people who reported this matter to Yang Chendong. If this was a peaceful era, this kind of training would indeed be a little too much. But now the world was already in chaos. No matter how powerful the 5-star army was, they would still have to face all kinds of provocations at any time. The influence of a strong army would be very great. In the end, Yang Chendong didn't criticize Tian Hu at all. Instead, he was very satisfied with Tian Hu's way of handling things. Not only did he scold the officer who came to complain, he even stripped him of his military uniform and transferred him to the local area to work. Yang Chendong's support gave Tian Hu a lot of confidence and courage. This was also the biggest reason why the 1st Cavalry Division was like a ferocious tiger on the battlefield, without any opponents. After all, Tian Hu used to be one of his students. He was a talent who excelled in both the pen and the sword. Yang Chendong believed that Tian Hu's training should be targeted. As for injuries during training, it was originally unavoidable. It only proved that one's strength wasn't up to expectations. In order to make the best use of the sharp sword in his hand, Yang Chendong gave another order to allow Tian Hu to continue expanding the army. The soldiers could be selected from the entire army. In the end, there would be 5 regiments, with each regiment having 2,000 soldiers. A total of 10,000 soldiers. Yang Chendong even publicly stated that once the 1st Cavalry Division expanded from the current 6,000 soldiers to 10,000, he would personally confer the rank of Major General to Tian Hu. A division commander could actually obtain the rank of general. This was a special case in the entire 5-star army. Tian Hu would break another record. Because of this, Tian Hu was naturally very excited. As a warrior, he had dreamed of becoming a general when he first joined the army. Now that his dream was about to come true, all he had to do was work harder to repay everything he had received. Along with the arrival of a higher honor, there was also a corresponding pressure. The difficulty of expanding the 1st Cavalry Division was no less than the expansion of the Cold Front. Especially this time, there were actually more than 4,000 soldiers. It was almost the same size as when the 1st Cavalry Division was first established. As a division commander, Tianhu's workload was naturally very heavy. At this time, the 6th Madam informed him to attend the ball. It was obvious that Tianhu was very unwilling, but he had to come. Tianhu used to be one of Yang Qindong's students. He came into contact with new things like ballroom dancing early. When he first started learning, he was also one of the people who danced well. If he had nothing to do, he wouldn't reject this kind of ball. In fact, he would even welcome it. But this time, after Yang Qindong finished speaking, he drank a glass of red wine and sat in a corner with his head lowered to think. The 6th young master had high hopes for him and the 1st Cavalry Division. How could he not disappoint the 6th young master? He had to do things well, quickly complete the expansion of the 1st Cavalry Division, and maintain the original combat strength. He had to seriously consider these things. However, even with his head lowered, the 2 stripes and 4 stars on his uniform were still as dazzling as ever. It was as if he was the sun that was shining brightly. It was impossible to ignore it even if he wanted to. At this moment, there were more than 10 pairs of eyes staring in this direction. Among them, there was even a young girl who was walking towards this corner. These 10 pairs of eyes belonged to the daughters of the big families in North Korea. They knew very well what their mission was tonight. The fate of the entire family was tied to them. While they were feeling the pressure, their expressions were naturally very focused. All the high-ranking officers and some high-ranking cadres in the field had become their prey. For example, Yu Guang, the commander of the 2nd Maritime Army, his 3 division commanders, Ding Yang, He Gong, and Gu Yang, as well as the new governor of North Korea, Zhang Yi, and several high-ranking officials of the provincial government had all become their hunting targets. These people were even surrounded by a crowd of women. How could Tianhu, who was also a senior colonel, avoid them? Although his killing intent didn't diminish, it didn't stop people from approaching. Didn't they see that his 3 division commanders, Temur Lu Duo and Hu Bo, were already surrounded by beautiful women? The girl walking towards Tianhu was Li Minho's most beautiful daughter, Li Zhenju. Originally, she had already made preparations, but Han Chang's sudden appearance disrupted her original plan. After much difficulty, she managed to brush him off perfunctorily to the side. The few targets that she had been keeping an eye on were already surrounded by other girls. She had no choice but to look at Tianhu. Even though she felt that this person wasn't easy to get along with, when she thought of the mission her father had given her, and how she carried the hope of her family, she still walked over without hesitation. At first, Li Zhenju's footsteps were very quick, as if she was afraid that someone else would steal her target. However, as she got closer and closer to Tianhu, who was sitting in the corner, the feeling of nervousness and apprehension grew stronger and stronger. Women in ancient times were very conservative and reserved. They paid more attention to the orders of their parents and the words of the matchmaker. Many women didn't even step out of the house when they were young. They would only know the appearance of the man they were marrying when they were actually married. In the present day, this was undoubtedly a very sad thing. But at that time it was a common thing, so when she took the initiative to walk towards Tianhu, it could be imagined how much courage it took to do this. Originally, he was still thinking about things with his head down, but as Li Zhenju got closer and closer, Tianhu finally had a reaction. He raised his head and saw a girl with a very nervous face, but her appearance could be called very beautiful. Li Zhenju did have a certain capital, whether it was appearance or identity. She was a superior person. At this moment, her nervousness made her like a budding flower, and people couldn't help but look at her twice. Tianhu, who raised his head, was indeed amazed by Li Zhenju's appearance. But in less than a breath of time, he returned to normal. He also understood the other party's intention, then shook his head gently and said, "I'm sorry, I'm thinking about something now, and I don't want anyone to disturb me. No, please don't refuse, otherwise, I may die after this banquet." When Li Zhenju heard Tianhu's refusal, it was as if her head was hit with a stick, and then tears flowed from her eyes uncontrollably. Li Zhenju wasn't exaggerating. She had taken the initiative to look for Tianhu, and many people must have seen it. If she returned empty-handed, she didn't know how many unpleasant words would be spread out tonight. For a very pure girl like her, these kinds of words were terrible, and she was even more afraid. She who didn't complete the task perhaps did not need to wait for her father to scold her. She would use her own way to end her life. Yes, there were many women in that era who sacrificed themselves for the name of loyalty. This was the style and characteristics of that era. You could say that they were ignorant, or that they lacked education, but the truth was the truth, and it couldn't be changed. Originally, he wanted to put on a fierce face and scare the other party. Tianhu believed that when he put on a cold face, even the elite soldiers of the 1st Cavalry Division would feel afraid. He didn't believe that he couldn't scare a woman away. But after seeing Li Zhenju cry, and her appearance was so distressing, even his frozen heart couldn't help but beat twice at this moment. He knew that he couldn't refuse this woman today. "Oh, okay, then I'll dance with you. It's just that I haven't danced for a long time, so I might be a little rusty." The general agreed, and Li Zhenju was naturally very happy. Her small face immediately turned from crying to smiling. "I just learned it not long ago, and I'm not very good at dancing." "Good. Then we're about the same weight. Let's not laugh at each other, please." Tianhu was amused by Li Zhenju's manner of speaking. After laughing, he stood up and stretched out his arm to Li Zhenju like a gentleman. Then Li Zhenju, with a bright red face, stretched out her arm in response. And just when Tianhu's arm touched her waist, he could clearly feel an instinctive resistance from her body. Then her body involuntarily tensed for a moment before relaxing again. And she stepped onto the dance floor with Tianhu. Chapter 943. Some things could be faked, but some things could not be faked. Tianhu could clearly feel the nervousness in Li Zhenju's heart. Only a young girl who was ignorant of worldly affairs would have such an expression. In order to dispel the other party's nervousness, he revealed a smile on his face and said, "Not bad, your dance is not bad." Tianhu, who had just finished speaking, had an awkward expression on his face. It was not because of anything else, but because in the next second, Li Zhenju's jade-like foot had already stepped on his foot. In fact, the other party's figure was slim and not fat at all. This step was nothing to Tianhu, who had thick skin and thick muscles. However, after all, he had just praised the other party and was immediately slapped in the face. The awkwardness that should have appeared on his face. I'm sorry. When I heard the general's words just now, I became nervous and forgot how to dance." Li Zhenju lowered her head. At this moment, her face was so red that if one did not listen carefully, they would not be able to hear her voice clearly. As a commander, the young Tian, whose hearing was naturally good, he chuckled and said, "It doesn't matter. Relax your whole body. You can't be tense when dancing. Just follow the rhythm of the music. As long as you get into the mood, everything will be fine." "Oh." Li Zhenju listened and then unintentionally made a very cute action. That was, she stuck out her tongue to express her embarrassment. It was this action that attracted Tianhu, making him feel this girl's cuteness and her natural playfulness. Taking a deep breath, Tianhu suppressed some kind of impulse in his heart and continued. "Yes, take a deep breath, then exhale. After a few times, your nervousness will be reduced by a lot. Then, you will be able to enter a normal state." Li Zhenju followed Tianhu's instructions. Sure enough, after a few times, she felt that the nervousness in her heart was not as strong as before. The dance steps that she had learned over the past few days could finally be used. She could even cooperate with Tianhu to make a few difficult movements. Immediately she said with a happy face, "You're so good. Did you often dance before?" "How is that possible? Even if I didn't have the time, I didn't have the conditions. I just learned it from the 6th young master." Tianhu shook his head with a smile. "The 6th young master? Loyal and courageous? Did you learn from him?" Li Zhenju asked curiously. "Yes. I was once one of the students of the 6th young master, and that was one of the best times of my life." The murderous look on Tianhu's face disappeared as he recalled the time when he was Yang Qindong's student. It was replaced by beautiful memories. Suddenly, the resolute general turned into a gentle and heroic man. This scene made Li Zhenju stare blankly. She even forgot the seniority. She raised her head and stared at Tian Hu's face impolitely. To her, tonight was the day to find a backer for herself. Her father's request was very simple. The other party only needed to have enough power to protect the Li family. Of course, the higher the position, the better. But for Li Zhenju, if she could find a man she liked who was also capable, it would be the best of both worlds. She didn't know what love at first sight was. She only knew that it would be good if the other party didn't make her hate him. Otherwise, she really didn't dare to imagine what it would be like to spend the rest of her life with a man she didn't like, and even hated from the bottom of her heart. Fortunately, she was lucky enough to meet Tian Hu. Not only was this person young, but he also had many pentagrams and bars on his shoulders. He also looked easy to get along with, and wasn't the kind of person who was overbearing. This made Li Zhenju's heart filled with happiness. On the battlefield, Tian Hu would not even bat an eyelid even if he was facing an army of thousands of men and horses, or an enemy that was several times his size. But now, facing Li Zhenju's gaze, he realized that he was unable to withstand it. He gently turned his head to look at other places. When he found that there weren't many people paying attention to him, he breathed a sigh of relief. Then he coughed lightly. "May I know Mrs. name?" "Oh." Being asked, Li Zhenju seemed to wake up from a dream. She hurriedly lowered her head. When she thought of the scene where she stared at Tian Hu with all her attention, she felt a burst of blush. Tian Hu wanted to ask for the girl's name, but when he asked, the other party didn't have any intention of responding. He felt a burst of powerlessness and had no choice but to ask again. "My name is Tian Hu. May I know Mrs. name?" "Ah. My name is Li Zhenju. You can call me Zhenju or Zhu." At this moment, Li Zhenju just remembered that she hadn't answered his question. She felt her face burning up. She must have lost her composure for a while. "Zhenju? Not bad, a good name. Then I'll call you Zhu from now on. And you, if you want, you can call me Big Brother Tian from now on." Tian Hu looked at Li Zhenju's self-blaming look, and found that she gave people a strong desire to protect her when she was cute. It made him want to hold her in his arms and take good care of her. The so-called bright and affectionate was referring to the current Tian Hu and Li Zhenju. When the music ended and there was a short break, the two of them reluctantly let go of each other. Then, as a man, Tian Hu generously invited the other party to sit in the corner, so that the two of them could continue to talk and deepen their understanding of each other. Of course, Li Zhenju wouldn't miss such an opportunity. She nodded repeatedly. Then, she thought of something and nodded reservedly. When Tian Hu saw this scene, he couldn't help but chuckle. After the long song ended, the situation in the field gradually became clear. If both the man and woman felt good, they would invite each other to sit alone for a while. If they didn't feel good, they would naturally smile and politely part. Yang Chendong and Luan Xiaoyu also came to the main seat after the song. Then, they saw that there were already a few young men and women sitting together in the field. Looking at the initial results, Luan Xiaoyu couldn't help but happily say, "Big brother, look at the results. A few men and women are about to freely fall in love." Yang Chendong shook his head and chuckled. Was this considered to be the beginning of love? At most, they would have a little favorable impression of each other. Moreover, this favorable impression was forced on the woman. To put it bluntly, the choice was all up to the man. Just like this ball, it was set to celebrate the victory, connect the feelings between everyone, and also solve the personal problems of some officers and cadres. But in fact, the last one was the most important. By solving the problems of some cadres, the local upper class of the Korean people would be integrated into Yangxia through marriage. This could deepen the feelings between everyone and make everyone warm up faster. It could also improve the overall quality of the next generation. Yang Chendong didn't object to this point. After all, who wouldn't like beautiful things? Yang Chendong also didn't object to this point that the local forces would be disintegrated faster through marriage. As long as these people were loyal to him, why couldn't he develop their forces in private? It was simply unrealistic to expect that everyone was a saint and would work hard for him without getting anything in return. However, development was development. He must not go against the general direction of this big force. Otherwise, no matter who the other party was, he wouldn't mind uprooting them. When that time came, these people shouldn't blame him for being ruthless. After all, everything these people had was given to them by him. He also had the right to take everything back if he was forced to. Yang Chendong smiled and didn't say anything. Luan Xiaoyu thought that this meant that he approved of her plan. She immediately asked, "Big brother, how did my mission go?" "Good, very good." Yang Chendong was not stingy with his praise. Luan Xiaoyu smiled happily when she saw the praise. For her, this was the best reward. Outside the crowd, the parents of the aristocratic families were naturally very happy. Like Li Minho, when he saw that his daughter was sitting together with the commander of the 1st Cavalry Division and chatting happily, he was so happy that his mouth was about to split open. It was as if he could already see the bright future of the Li family. On the other hand, some of the family heads whose daughters had returned to their original positions were anxious. They hurriedly ordered that there would be 2 more songs in a while, and that they must hurry up. If they couldn't find a high-grade song, they should choose a low-grade one. In short, they must gain something. Otherwise, it would be hard to say if they could still stand on top of Seoul in the future. This time, Han Chang came with his father and sister. Unfortunately, his sister belonged to those people who didn't gain anything. At this time, his father, Han Zhao, was continuing to work with his sister. It was as if he had to gain something. Otherwise, the Han family would be in danger. At this moment, Han Chang didn't pay attention to this at all. His eyes were fixed on Li Zhenju, who was chatting happily with Tian Hu in the corner. Once upon a time, everyone treated them as a match made in heaven. At that time, because the Han family had some relationship with Han Mingjin, they were at the peak of their power. Even Li Minho had to curry favor with his father. Not only did he not object to the matter between him and Li Zhenju, but he also often talked about it, as if everyone was already a family. But now, everything had changed. Han Mingjin was killed, and the 5-star army entered the city. The Han family was no longer a noble family. Han Chang had also been reduced from a first-class son to a nobody, so much so that he had to worry about his own life. At this time, the Li family had also changed. No one mentioned the marriage anymore. Now he had to watch the girl he liked, who he had always thought was destined to be his wife, force a smile in front of another man. Chapter 944. Han Chang, who had been misled, did not see the sincere smile on Li Zhenju's face. Instead, he thought that she must have been forced. And he, as a man destined to marry Li Zhenju, had to do something now. Otherwise, this shame would accompany him for the rest of his life. He lifted his foot and walked towards the corner. Step by step, he was very determined. His fists were clenched, and all the muscles in his body were taut at this moment. He wanted to teach that officer a lesson. He wanted to show his manly side. Tian Hu, who was sitting there chatting with Li Zhenju, had a smile on his face. The more he got to know her, the more he found her pure and lovely side. She seemed to be without any schemes. They talked about some embarrassing things that happened to her when she was a child. At one point, even Tian Hu could not help laughing and sighing after hearing about it. Just as they were chatting happily, a sudden gust of wind came from the back of Tian Hu's head, smashing towards it. If this hit, he would definitely have a slight concussion, and there might be some sequelae. Who was Tian Hu? He had killed countless enemies on the battlefield, and was often used to long-range attacks. It was common for him to fight with fewer people. How could such a sneak attack escape his eyes and ears? When Han Chang approached him, he felt it. He did not move, just wanted to see what Han Chang was going to do. At the moment when he felt the long fist coming, he just tilted his head slightly and easily dodged it. Then he raised his right hand and accurately grabbed the wrist. With a fierce force, he pulled Han Chang, who was sneaking behind him, over. Under the powerful force, he directly turned Han Chang 180 degrees and threw him to the ground. Han Chang threw a punch, and felt that there was nothing in front of him. Before he could make a move, a pain came from his wrist. He just felt that his whole arm seemed to be out of his control. and there was a sound of wind in his ears. He fell to the ground with a plop, and there was a huge pain in his internal organs. Breathing became a very extravagant thing. It was not until he was thrown to the ground for a while that his whole body felt less painful. At this moment, he realized that the martial arts he had learned before were so ridiculous and so unbearable. He could not even block one move from his opponent. When Han Chang was thrown to the ground, it caused a huge commotion and attracted the attention of everyone present. Everyone was busy building relationships and chatting about their feelings. In such a harmonious scene, it was impossible not to attract attention when someone was suddenly beaten up. As the father, Han Zhao was the first to let out a cry of surprise. He ran straight to his son who had been thrown to the ground. However, someone was faster than him. For security guards appeared out of thin air and surrounded the corner of the room. Han Zhao had just run over when he was stopped by a guard. Normally he would be extremely respectful, but now that he was worried about his son's safety, he didn't care so much. He wanted to rely on his brute force to rush up. The result was naturally that he was held down by a grappling hand. His arm was pressed down, and he let out a scream. Cold sweat poured out of his head. With this shout, Han Chang, who was lying on the ground, was completely awakened. When he saw that his father was also under the control of others, he couldn't help but roar loudly, "Let go of my father. If you have any problems, come at me. Come at me." "Shut up." A guard unceremoniously lifted his foot and landed on Han Chang's waist. With just one kick, he completely lost the ability to shout and fainted. Sixth young master, this is the Han father and son. They have some fame and influence in Seoul. Sitting next to Yang Chendong, the new governor of North Korea, Zhang Yi introduced them. "What the hell is going on? Beta Persei, go and see." Yang Chendong nodded slightly and motioned to Beta Persei. Beta Persei went quickly and came back even faster. Tian, who was naturally very cooperative, and told him what had just happened. Li Zhenju was indeed frightened at first, but when she saw the displeasure on Tian Hu's face, she was afraid that Han Chang would die because of this. Being kind, she stood up and made a simple introduction of the relationship between the two. She only said that the two had met a few times and that Han Chang had a good impression of her. This time he must have been angry and did not do it on purpose. "Brother Beta Persei, give me some face. Han Chang didn't hurt me. It's better to let him go." Tian, who didn't want Li Zhenju to be disappointed in him. He didn't put people like Han Chang in his eyes, so he pleaded for him. Li Zhenju looked at him gratefully when she heard his words. Beta Persei nodded immediately. He couldn't decide whether to give face to Tian Hu or not. This was something that even the young master was concerned about, but he would definitely report Tian Hu's attitude to the young master. Yang Er left and returned to Yang Chendong's side. He told Yang Chendong what he had learned, especially the part where Tian Hu had pleaded for leniency. "Oh, he's so cold-blooded on the battlefield, but he's also affectionate and righteous in life. Not bad." Yang Chendong smiled after listening. A general killed the enemy on the battlefield. This was something that couldn't be helped, but in life, a general should also show his benevolence and righteousness. Tian Hu's approach was very qualified. After some teasing, Yang Chendong decided to give face to Tian Hu. If that's the case, send the Han father and son out. The unconscious Han Chang was carried out, followed by his father, Han Zhao, and his sister, who came for a blind date. But even if such a thing happened, which officer would be willing to be on good terms with the Han family? With a sorrowful expression, Han Chang knew that this time, the Han family was going to decline. He no longer dared to hope for a future. He only hoped that his family would be safe and sound. He would be satisfied as long as they could keep their lives. If he wanted to be safe, an apology was naturally necessary. Han Zhao decided to wait for his son to wake up and persuade him well. Then he would visit him early the next morning to apologize. He thought that a dignified general should still have some magnanimity. But how could he know that he wouldn't have such an opportunity? He would never have it. Guo Xinqing and Li Qingsong, who were in the dark, saw their son being carried out of the ball. He and his daughter were accompanying him with sad expressions. They were like dogs who saw a bone. They saw hope and opportunity. More than 2 hours later, the ball was over. The money that the two of them had used to plant spies in the homes of some of the North Korean officials had worked. The whole story of what had happened in the house of Han had reached their ears. Then a sinister plan to shift the blame was quickly put into action. Han Zhao almost didn't sleep all night. The next day, when the sun rose, he went to his son's room. For the future of the Han family and for the safety of his family, he had to persuade his son to apologize to Tian-Hu. He had also investigated last night. This Tian-Hu was actually the commander of the 1st Cavalry Division. He was one of the generals that even the Duke of Zhongdan valued very much. If he couldn't solve the problem with this person, the Han family would only be in trouble in the future. When Han Zhao pushed open the door of his son's room, an earth-shattering scream came out. Han Zhao sat on the ground with a plop. Looking at his son whose nose had been cut and whose face had been disfigured, he only felt dizzy at this moment. His eyes were filled with countless golden flowers. The scream quickly attracted the other Han family members. After seeing this scene, they cried one after another. After an unknown period of time, Han Zhao's voice sounded again. Come, prepare a sedan. I'm going to file a complaint. I'm going to file a complaint. Without his son, it meant that there was no hope in life. At this moment, Han Zhao was no longer thinking about the future. He just wanted to seek justice for his son. No matter who the murderer was, he must be brought to justice. In the morning, the provincial government was very lively. The new provincial government was still choosing a site. Now, it was using the former army yamen of the North Korean kingdom, which was quite spacious. But soon, the place was jammed. When Han Chang's corpse was placed at the entrance, it quickly attracted the attention of many commoners, and even some officials and servants. As Han Zhao knelt on the ground and recounted the scene that happened at the ball last night, the tragic death of his son, and the experience of having his nose dug out, the surrounding commoners finally understood what had happened. Instinctively, everyone thought that Tian-Hu was the murderer. Furthermore, one of the ways the 5-star army recorded military achievements was to see how many noses were dug out. This seemed to be the case. Li residence. After returning from the ball last night, as the host, Li Minheo's face was full of joy. He didn't know how long it had been since he had such a relaxed smile. And all of this was due to his daughter, Li Zhenju. If she could really become Tian-Hu's concubine, who would dare to provoke the Li family for no reason in the future. In the morning, Li Zhenju had just woken up and was dressing up when Li Minheo walked in. Some of the serving maids retreated. Father, you can't be in such a hurry. Seeing Li Minheo walk in, Li Zhenju lowered her head and said shyly. When she returned last night, Li Minheo asked when Tian-Hu would marry her, which made Li Zhenju blush. She had only met Tian-Hu once, and both of them had a good chat. It was a bit too early to talk about marriage. This morning, her father came again. Li Zhenju instinctively thought that it was still the same matter, so she lowered her head and blushed. But unexpectedly, the next news shocked her. After about 2 breaths, she woke up and looked at Li Minheo and said, Han Chang is dead? How is that possible? Father, don't tell me you think it was Brother Tian who did it? Father didn't say that. Li Minheo shook his head. Although he denied it, it could be seen from his expression that he somewhat believed it. Chapter 945. Not only Li Minheo, but many people would think the same. Otherwise, how could things be so coincidental? Just as they were having a fight, the other side was killed? Even if it wasn't Li Minheo who did it, he should have instructed others to do so. In short, it must have something to do with him. Not to mention Li Zhenju's face turned pale after hearing this. Li Minheo himself also felt a sense of sadness. In any case, he and Han Zhao were the ministers of the destroyed country. Since Han Chang could die without knowing why, then if they were disobedient, would they also have the same result at any time? In the North Korean palace, outside Yang Chendong's temporary residence, Beta Persei calmly told Yang Chendong the news he had just received. Young master, I have sent people to investigate what Division Commander Tian did after he went back last night, and whether anyone from the 1st Cavalry Division went out. Director Yu Ken of the Security Bureau has already gone to the Han family to investigate the situation. In addition, Governor Zhang Yi is waiting outside the palace. He wants to see the young master. Let Governor Zhang come over. Yang Chendong's expression didn't change, as if he had heard a very ordinary thing. This calmness made Beta Persei breathe a sigh of relief, and it also made Zhang Yi, who came in later, feel a lot less pressured. He was originally worried that the sixth young master would get angry. If this was the case, he, as the newly appointed governor, would lose a point first. Tell me your own opinion. As soon as Zhang Yi sat down, Yang Chendong's voice came clearly. Yes, sixth young master, in this subordinate's opinion, this matter was deliberately done by someone in order to frame our 5-star army and cause chaos in Seoul. Then, some people wanted to take advantage of the situation. In this subordinate's opinion, we can't let this wind blow. We should immediately increase our control over the entire city. Once we discover that someone dares to use this opportunity to cause trouble, we definitely can't be lenient. If there's one, we'll catch one. If there's two, we'll catch a pair. In short, we must stabilize and suppress everything. Zhang Yi said with certainty. It was precisely because he had a ruthless side in his heart that Yang Chendong transferred him to North Korea, to control this unstable region. Not bad. Then let's do as you say. If you need to mobilize any troops, look for Beta Persei and ask him to cooperate with you. Yang Chendong was very satisfied with this answer. In chaotic times, heavy punishments were needed. In order to prevent the situation from becoming even more chaotic, he had to be more heavy-handed than usual. After receiving Yang Chendong's affirmation, Zhang Yi quickly left to make arrangements. Not long after, the director of the Security Bureau in North Korea, Yu Ken, rushed over. As soon as he saw him, he said with a serious expression, "The sixth young master is not doing very well." Tell me. Yes. This subordinate went to see the scene. The person who did it was clean and did not leave any useful clues. After comparing the saber used to dig his nose, it was the saber commonly used by our cavalry. When Yu Ken said this, his head lowered a lot. What? Do you suspect that Division Commander Tian really sent someone to do it? Yang Chendong raised his eyebrows and asked aloud. It's just a suspicion. We still need to investigate and collect evidence. But I don't know if the subordinate can call Division Commander Tian's subordinate to ask him. Without enough evidence, Yu Ken naturally did not dare to make a decision. But if he wanted to clear the suspicion, more investigation was necessary. Yang Chendong did not answer immediately. His intuition told him that this matter should have nothing to do with Tian Hu. Since Han Chong was already knocked out yesterday, wouldn't it be superfluous for him to kill someone with this person's identity? And if he did it at this time, it would inevitably make everyone suspect him. How could such a stupid decision be made by 100 victories general? But if he did not investigate, it would be inevitable that people would say that the officials were protecting each other. This would be a great hindrance in stabilizing the situation in North Korea. For the sake of the overall situation, sometimes some small grievances were inevitable. Alright, go ahead and investigate. You can also investigate openly. As for Tian Hu, you don't have to ask him. I'll ask him myself. Beta Persei, call Tian Hu over. An investigation into Han Chong's death began. According to Yang Chendong's idea, the Security Bureau personnel entered the 1st Cavalry Division's encampment and launched an investigation into the officers of the entire division, especially those who were not in the barracks last night. In the face of the Security Bureau's investigation, the officers and soldiers of the 1st Cavalry Division were not very cooperative. Many of them even showed fierce expressions. They had killed too many enemies on the battlefield, so when they revealed their murderous aura, some members of the Security Bureau were also horrified. In the end, the 2nd Guard Brigade's Captain Dao Xiao personally appeared to calm the situation. These people represented the 6th young master, and no one dared to behave atrociously in front of them. At the same time, Tian Hu was also brought to the palace. The moment he saw Yang Chendong, he knelt on the ground and shouted, "Teacher, I was wronged." "I know you were wronged. Get up quickly." Yang Chendong looked at Tian Hu and nodded. The grief and indignation on his face had already told him the answer. Usually, only people who were wronged would show such an expression. It seemed that this matter really had nothing to do with Tianhu. Then who did it? The investigation was still ongoing, and it even caused a storm in the city. Everyone was in danger. Even with the 2nd Guard Brigade, it was said that there were all kinds of dissatisfied voices in the 1st Cavalry Division. In the palace, Yang Chendong, the Duke of Loyalty, did not do anything. However, his 6th wife, Luan Xiaoyu, was constantly running around and meeting with many influential people in North Korea. She was constantly comforting them. In a restaurant on the street, Guo Xinqing and Li Qingsong looked at the pedestrians on the street who came and went in a hurry, as if they were afraid of something. The two of them could not help but show a satisfied expression. All of this was their masterpiece. They killed Han Chang, and the purpose was to frame Tianhu. This was also something that could not be helped. They were tasked with assassinating Yang Chendong, but he was usually too well protected, and they could not find a chance at all. Thus, they came up with this plan, hoping to find a chance in the chaos. Unfortunately, even if such a big thing happened, from the news from the informants, Yang Chendong did not come out of the palace. The investigation and pacification were done by others. Facing an assassination mission that did not have a chance at all, the two of them had to change their previous plan and shift their target from Yang Chendong. Let's make a move on her. I have already checked. When she goes out, she usually only has about 30 guards, and most of them are female soldiers. As long as we gather all our strength and are fast enough, there is still a chance, Guo Xinqing said as he made a decision. His target was Luan Xiaoyu. Luan Xiaoyu was Yang Chendong's 6th wife. This was not a secret in Seoul. Making a move on her could also anger Yang Chendong and bring disaster to the Southern Ming Dynasty. In this way, their mission could be considered completed. We can only do so. Then I will go arrange it and gather everyone. Li Qingsong nodded in agreement. Guo Xinqing's eyes lit up. Remember, this time do not hold back. Mobilize all the spies that the Southern Ming Dynasty arranged here. Since we are going to make a move, we have to go all out. Even if we can't kill this woman, we have to seriously injure her. Otherwise, we will not be able to achieve our goal. Understood. Li Qingsong nodded with a smile. If there were no spies from the Southern Ming Dynasty, they would not be able to frame the Southern Ming Dynasty. He was clear about this principle. Guo Xinqing and Li Qingsong were bribed by the Southern Ming Dynasty's Zhu Huichun, but not many people knew about it. For example, the Southern Ming Dynasty's embroidered uniform guards were still in the dark. This was why the two of them could casually mobilize the Southern Ming Dynasty's spies after coming to North Korea. Most of these people were arranged here before the battle at Tumu Fort to gather information. They did not expect that they would all be used now. Li Qingsong went to make preparations, leaving Guo Xinqing sitting there alone with a sinister smile on his face. Everyone in the world said that the Duke of Loyalty and Courage was very powerful and never suffered losses. This time he wanted to make the other party suffer in silence. Whether the operation was successful or not, Yang Chendong would only hate the Southern Ming Dynasty. In this way, Li Huichuan's goal of getting someone else to do the dirty work would be achieved. He would also become the first person to make Yang Chendong suffer a great loss. It was possible that he would become famous in the world. As the operation began, the pawns that had been lying in ambush were activated one after another. Some of them were small businessmen, some were restaurant owners and even waiters, and some were even farmers. But after receiving the order, they put away all kinds of concealment, took out the dusty sabers that had been sealed for a long time, and gathered at the designated location. At 8 o'clock in the morning, a luxurious carriage came out of the North Korean palace. There were 36 guards beside it, and 20 of them were female soldiers. In the entire North Korea, only Luan Xiaoyu had such treatment as bringing female soldiers out. The carriage came out of the palace, then passed through Yuhua Street, and went straight to the more prosperous Eugene Street in Seoul. That was where the rich and powerful gathered, and there were many North Korean officials living there. On the road from Yuhua Street to Eugene Street, there was a straight turn. It was a mile long, and the road was narrow. Usually there would not be any merchants or people staying here. It was also the place that Guo Xinqing and Li Qingsong prepared for Luan Xiaoyu to be buried. The carriage slowly moved forward, and the 36 guards around it followed behind the carriage at a leisurely pace. Everything looked the same as usual. There was nothing out of the ordinary. However, the sudden sound of arrows piercing through the air broke the silence. The arrows pierced the carriage as if they had eyes, and soon the carriage became a hedgehog. Boom! A flashing red signal flare rose into the air, and someone among the guards issued a warning. The other guards shouted to protect Minister Luan, and the carriage was protected. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.